is a lifestyle. Sports cards and we live now. Jeremy Lee in the building and every guest that you ever needed. Sports cards after hours keep the hobby heated. Updates, hobby talk like you never seen it. Sports cards live and none could ever beat it. Sports cards is a lifestyle. Sports cards and we live now. Welcome to another episode of Sports Cards Live with your host, Jeremy Lee.
All right, welcome everybody to episode number 183 of Sports Cards Live. It is Saturday night, May the 13th, 2023. My name is Jeremy Lee. I want to thank Corey Fick from Show Your Slabs for joining the show last time. I want to also thank everybody who joined for the inaugural coverage of the Slab Sharks auction a couple Thursdays ago. Thank you for that. Also, after this episode tonight, we'll be back live whenever this one ends for an episode of After Hours with Joe Perot. We will debrief this episode and do some freestyling tomorrow night, 9:30 Eastern on the channel. With Josh Madigan of Hockey Cards Gong Show, we will be covering the PWCC weekly hockey auctions. And on Monday, I am debuting a new show in collaboration with the Sports Card Dad Network featuring myself and Dennis Zender, also known as PC with DPZ. You may know him from his collector series that used to be on the Luca Nation Network, but is now moved over to the Sports Card Dad channel. Our first episode will be this Monday. Will be more on all these hot topics, and it is called Taking Stock, again debuting on Monday. All right, a couple of sponsor shout outs, everybody. Please join over 300,000 people that have already downloaded the Center Stage app across both iOS and Android for quick comps and card management features. Their app is the fastest and most accurate at card shows or at home to help you price your cards, build, organize, and share your collection with your friends, and find other collectors to follow using their social sharing features. They have some exciting new partnerships coming soon. Please stay tuned and join me in supporting the great team they have and the innovation they are undertaking. Also, use protection, practice safe swaps. VeriSwap is an app and middleman service that lets you securely trade cards through the mail. Every transaction up to $1 million in value is fully insured by their guarantee. To use VeriSwap, simply upload your inventory, make trade, partial trade, or full cash offers, and negotiate with thousands of traders already on the platform. Check them out on iOS and Android. As part of a special offer, your first trade on VeriSwap is only $1. There is a referral link in the video description for your convenience. Also, please be sure to check out hobbynewsdaily.com for a daily dose of hobby news and entertaining content. It's a collaboration of various content creators and original writers, and just launched back last month on April 1st. Also, shout out Leighton Sheldon. He'll be joining us for the Vintage Spotlight segment a little bit later tonight. Couple of thank yous, guys. I want to thank Rob Gerard, Sports Card Therapist, for having me on his Content Creators Roundtable. I want to thank Hockey Cards Gong Show for having me on their first ever YouTube live stream covering the NHL Draft Lottery. Also, Paul Hickey for having me on Sports Card Strategy Show. Troy and David of Dave and Adams for having me on The Chase last week and to talk about tag rating. And finally, Cardboard Coaches for having me on their podcast last week. And always, guys, thank you so much to the loyal viewers and listeners of Sports Cards Live. If you're not yet subscribed to this channel, please take a moment and do so. As always tonight, mostly as always, your comments and questions are in play. We will be monitoring them tonight, especially tight. So please remain respectful. Let's get to tonight's show. Our guest tonight started in the hobby opening Donruss in 1989. And when Shaquille O'Neal stuff came out in 92, he'd spend his allowance in snow shoveling money chasing the big man's cards. He bought and sold cards right through until 2017 and was PSA's biggest submitter for many of those years. He started the one-team international agency, OTIA Sports, for athlete signings in 2017. And in 2020, he rejuvenated his ISA grading company. His favorite teams are the University of Michigan Wolverines and all Detroit Pro teams. His favorite athletes are Grant Hill and Barry Sanders. Originally from and currently hailing from Ann Arbor, Michigan, let's bring him out. Jason Koonce, welcome to Sports Cards Live. How are you tonight?
Jeremy, what's up, man? I really appreciate having me on. I'm good. Yeah, it's late here on the East Coast. It's 10 o'clock, so I'm excited to be on.
Well, it's good to have you, Jason. It's funny because the timing it's ironic, the timing having you on, because we saw the Evan Mathis video come out within the last, 7 to 10 days. You've been caught up in the trimming scandals over the years. Your name is among those listed. So, but the fact of the matter is we plan to have you on here did we plan this at the Mint Collective? I feel like it's a couple months ago that we planned it, and then this happened, and I thought, oh, this is going to be extra juicy now because of what's gone on.
Yeah, I think we booked this like 2.5, 3 months ago. So, it was scheduled. So, yeah.
It was. All right. So before we jump in, we got a lot of comments already. I'm going to jump into a couple. Jeff S., welcome to the show. Mike Petty says, when is this criminal Koonce on? Can't wait to see how Leighton interacts. Let's see if Leighton is on gag or stands up to fraud in the hobby. Koonce is just one of thousands in a network of thieves. Well, we will be talking about, we're going to hear it from you. I don't see a question there from Mike Petty, so we'll just keep on going. Vintage card collector, good to see you. Collector's Dream, Corey Carr, happy Saturday. Al G in the house. Jeff McMahon in the house. Very good. Jeff Hart, good evening to you. Rob Gerard, sports card therapist, good evening. Good evening. All right, Lapper in the house. Rich Baganyan in the house. Mike Petty says he'll be censored in 2 minutes. Just don't disrespect my platform or my guest, Mike, and you won't be censored.
Or Mike, ask a question, Mike. Don't what's your question, or what's your, ask a question. Don't make a comment like that, and I'm happy to answer anything. So.
And let me just tell everybody, I solicited a segment of the community for questions. We've got, I don't know if we have any softballs tonight. I think we're going hard tonight, Jason, and to the audience. So if you have questions or accusations, watch the show. If halfway through, 3/4 through, you don't feel like we're doing you justice, then feel free to throw them into the chat. But I think we're going to be asking all the questions that people want to know. Hobby Champs, what's going on? Mookie Chilson in the house. Baz in the house. We got sports cards nonsense in the house. What's going on, fellas? Jeff S. here. Eric Stefano. Willie T. Glad you're here and looking forward to it. Jason, before we get into the controversial stuff, I want to know, hobby-wise, when did you really get started? You got started as a kid, but tell us a little bit. What do you collect? What do you love about this hobby?
Yeah, so I've been doing it as a kid, just like everyone else. Kind of in my teenage years, when a lot of my friends kind of veered off into doing normal teenage stuff, I kind of stumbled upon my first card show, which is obviously much different than a card shop, where a card shop back then, at least, they had full control, right? Like the prices were what they were. There's not a lot of negotiating. So that first experience of a card show at maybe like 12 years old was such a unique experience, because there was actually like a place where you could go and make money versus a card shop where you're just paying. It's different now because card shops are, have evolved over the past 30 years. But just that excitement of that first card show, of being able to actually buy something, negotiate, and then get it, kind of was like the instant rush for me. Shortly thereafter, like a close friend that did this with me and his father, we went to my first national was St. Louis 95. And I kind of started early on picking up more of, the buying and flipping and stuff and all that. But I think shortly thereafter was a Fort Washington show. It was in Philadelphia. I think it was Fort Washington. And I remember being set up, and Steve Rocky came by, the president of PSA. And this actually will show everybody how far we've evolved. Steve Rocky is trying to convince people why you should submit your cards to PSA. And you have all these old-time dealers that are like, why the hell am I going to give you my cards? I know what my cards are. And so it's just, we'll grade some stuff for free for you. And that was my first moment where I kind of was like, this grading thing is going to be a big thing. It hadn't taken off yet. Like a Ricky Henderson 10 was still $500. It wasn't a thing yet. So that's kind of what I really remember early on, is like this, just being in super early and just believing in this guy at the time, kind of telling me that grading is going to be this massive thing, when at the time nobody really, everybody was new to grading. It was kind of like, why do I need somebody else to tell me what my cards are graded?
Yeah, I mean, grading was new to the hobby, and I remember those days clearly myself. So let's move on. In 2017, you lost your net worth. Tell that story.
2007.
My bad. 2007, You lost your net worth. You've since bounced right back. What happened? How did you lose your net worth?
Yes. So basically from 96, 97 till 2003, I was super successful. We can get into all the different stuff and, everything that I did. But basically in 2004, I'd been doing this for, 10 years now. Was kind of bored with it. And I'm 23 years old. I thought it would be a cool idea to say, hey, I'm retired. I always thought that was the end goal, was to make a bunch of money and then retire. So I sold all my cards, which at that point was still like this risky thing. Like everybody thought cards were, it was like I don't want to say a fad, but it wasn't the confidence even now that I have today in cards. Like after COVID now, I'm like super bullish long term on cards because we've survived one of these crazy, pandemics and stuff. But like back then, it was cool to have cards. Cards are worth stuff, but it wasn't like the true asset that you kind of feel like you have now. So I felt like I was moving into something that was risky, and I decided to put all my money in '05 in Florida real estate. Oh, so after I sold everything, I basically like for 2 or 3 weeks was, I'm retired. This is fun. And then, I'm an entrepreneur. I like to do things. So I'm bored out of my mind. So what's the next goal? I started dumping money into Florida real estate '05. And then obviously, we hit the biggest real estate crash in history. And it's funny because this is something that I thought I was going from an unsafe investment, which if I would have kept, I kept some stuff, but if I would have kept all my cards, it would have been, I'd be a billionaire. It's like all the shit I had back then. So I learned a lesson. I put all my eggs in one basket into real estate, and it all went to negative money. So I lost everything in '07 and started to rebuild in '08, and went up the ladder from there.
You said that you went to your first national, I think, in 1995. Are you going to be at the national this year at the end of July?
I will. This will be my 29th straight national. So I might have the record for, I don't know, like 29 in a row has got to be up there.
I think Dr. Beckett claims that he's been at every one since the beginning. So let's defer to him for the record. But I think you're probably right up there with a few others who've been in this thing so long. All right. So then there's the national. There's the expo up in Canada. Tell us a little bit about your thoughts on, and this is near and dear to my heart. It's like it's my home show. What are your thoughts on the expo up in Canada?
So, we kind of briefly talked about this earlier in the week. That show is, I didn't want to tell anybody. There's a few of us that knew about it, but the Toronto show was this sneaky, it was better than the national. For 10 years, the Toronto show, and I know it's a great show now, but it was the best show in the country. And the reason is there was so much clean hockey OPG. There's also a lot of clean other stuff, but I just feel like in Canada, at least in those times, and we're talking 10, 15 years ago, I don't know if it was just because it was a pain in the ass to send stuff to PSA, or people didn't trust it going across the border. I know there's PSA Canada now, so it's a little easier, but people were just much more timid to send stuff to PSA. And obviously, if you come across something that's high grade or gradable, it doesn't matter if you pay book or 120%. It doesn't matter really what you pay when the multiplier on a 9 or a 10 is going to be, 20, 30x. So that show was a gold mine because there just wasn't a lot of buyers up there. The US dollar was like almost 2 to 1. So it had a lot of buying power up there. It was a great show. I mean, it's like I have some good memories of that show. I've always spent a ton of money at that show. It was. I guess the secret's out now, though. It seems to be, from what I saw, jamming.
Yeah, the last one a couple of weeks ago was an unbelievable experience. Had a great time at that one. All right, let's talk about cracking slabs and resubmitting slabs. You've made money cracking and resubmitting. When did cracking a card out of a slab become a thing?
Yeah, so I mean, we can get to other stuff later, but like the reality is 90% of my fortune was made off of cracking slabs, and it just wasn't a thing. So I started, I think, the first card I ever graded with PSA in '95 was a Griffey Upper Deck. The funny thing is, I bought it. I went to a friend. I pre-sold it in a 10, even though I hadn't had the card. I sent it off. The card came back an 8, so I had to refund my friend his money because I pre-sold it as a 10 price. And I know why people bitch now in their first orders. But so I was confused. I was like, why did this card come back an 8? It was a 10. And, the card probably had like a lifted corner or something. So that was my first thought of like, maybe the guy had a bad day. And then I met a few other people, and we were kind of just chit-chatting about, it just seemed like everybody was stuck on, it is what it is. Like, whatever that card was at that time, like that card's a 9, it's a 9 for life. And it just, nobody thought the way they think now. Like, now thousands of people are like, understand of like, oh, like, the grading goes like this, right? It's just like, here's steady, and PSA grades hard, and then they loosen up a little bit. They grade it. So it's always like ebb and flow of how they're grading. A card graded on a Tuesday might be graded differently on a Friday, the guy's leaving the office versus, the guy comes in on Mondays, and he's irritated, and obviously the difference between an 8, 9, 9, 10 is like massive swing. So like 97, I just kind of started overpaying or just, working out deals with people to just buy cards. I had some guys where I would literally, if they had 100 Griffey Upper Deck 9s in their showcase, and I knew a lot of people, and I've known a lot of people over the years, but I would work out a deal. I'd say, let me borrow these Griffey 9s from you. And they'd be like, okay. And I was like, I'll make a deal with you. Let me borrow the Griffey 9s for, half a day or a day. And a Griffey 9 at the time was like, and I'm guessing, was like $350, and a 10 was $3,500. So I'd say, let me borrow these Griffey 9s off you, and any one that I buy, I'll probably buy 10 to 15% of them. I'll pay you $500 a card. So they're like, okay, why wouldn't they do that? So I would go to PSA. They'd be on site at the show. At the time, I think I had a deal where I was paying $20 a card on site, and I was grading, 2,000-3,000 cards at every show. But, I'd give them those cards in review, and of the 100 9s, they may bump 10, 12, whatever the number was. Like, there would be some that they would bump. I'd go back and purchase those cards off the, whoever, one of my buddies or a dealer. So just the math was massive. And just knowing that was me always looking for nice 8s, nice 9s, because back then there was a ton of them. There was me and maybe like 2 or 3 other people doing this, and then everybody else was just kind of set in stone on, it is what it is. Like, whatever was graded. Now people crack, there's cards I've cracked out. I've had a McGuire rookie I cracked out 26 times because I just thought it was, but by the time it got a 10, I think I lost money. But yeah, so those were the early days of cracking stuff out.
So based on what you just said, 26 times, I've always kind of wondered, how reliable are the PSA and BGS pop reports? Like, how overstated are they in terms of the fact that you might have, you've submitted a card 23 times. There's only one card for those 23 times. Yeah, there's going to be 23 occurrences in the pop report. When I started thinking about this a few years ago, I started thinking, maybe it's 5% overstated, maybe 10 at the most. And then I'd have, my buddy Bobby Burrell would tell me, nah, Jeremy, it's like 30%. I think, no way, Bobby. I'm starting to think it's closer to 30, maybe more. What's your gut feel? How overstated are the pop reports?
So to pick out one specific card to give you a really good example on is, someone can double check, but I think the pop report on Jordan PSA 9s is around 2,800. And it's give or take a little bit. And there was a period in the late 90s where we were trying to work a deal out with PSA to give back cert numbers or give back the flips to try to take stuff out of the pop. And they were giving us like a quarter credit. And that lasted like 6 months. It just got too crazy. And as much now as I think PSA acts like they don't want people buying and cracking out, it was massive for their business model because they were getting multiple revenue on the same card. Like, rather than getting $20 one time, they may get it 4 or 5 times. So, but the Jordan for I think it's 2,800. I've probably cracked out 200 to 250 Jordan 9s myself. So, and I know others that have too. So I would guess the real, like on a Jordan 9, I think the pop is probably closer to like 2,200 versus 2,800. So what percent is that? Is that 20%? Yeah. And that's just that card. Now that's a card that had a very high risk reward. So maybe that's a little bit more than some other stuff. And obviously, like I've cracked a ton of Griffey Upper Deck 9s. That's a card that is probably pretty exaggerated too. I mean, some other oddball stuff like, the Jim Brown PSA 8 pop, like I would think that's fairly accurate because, a lot of people probably weren't taking the higher the risk, just didn't make sense. So
Do you think the crack and resub game is that over now? Is it still going? And yeah, go with that one first. Is that game still good to go?
So, I mean, this can venture into more questions, but yeah. So, in my opinion, the game is 95% over, which is kind of the reason in 2019, like I kind of shifted into, focusing on. I kind of retired again for a little bit, and then obviously had this passion project with ISA and all that stuff. But yeah, to me, that like the game was over, and it's just and and the funny thing is a lot of new people came in, investors and big money during COVID. And I remember one guy came to me and big money, I think might have been a billionaire, and he wanted me to sign an NDA because he had this amazing idea. And I'm like, I'm not signing an NDA, like whatever, I don't care. So finally he's like, okay, don't tell anybody. And I was like, okay, what's your plan? He goes, what do you think if we go buy 100 Jordan 9s and crack them all out and send them to PSA and try to get some 10s? And like, but this is somebody new to the hobby, so like it's registering that that's a thing. And I'm trying to tell people like, if you see like unless it's like a fresh from a wax or like a new collection, if you see a nice Jordan, like there's a good chance that if unless it's like freshly, even if it's freshly graded, there's a really good chance that card's been tried several times, and most decent cards are probably maxed out right now. New stuff it's different. 2022, 2023 product, like that's different because it just comes out. People are gonna crack it maybe once or twice, but like anything vintage and anything pre, like Curry year, I would say, yeah, it's not in your favor. It's not in your favor at this point. I think the game is over. Like I'm not really like, I've probably graded less than 100 cards in the last 3 or 4 years.
How much of the game, when you were playing it like, really exploiting it, how much of the game was based on knowing when the grading companies were being more difficult and when they were being, more loose with their grading?
Yeah. So early on, I would get frustrated, right? So like everybody else, like you get a bad order and it happens, you get an order back and you're pissed. Like, you're like, why is this? Why is this? And more, I would say more often than not, you're pissed than like, you're just like thrilled out of your mind. And as a young, 18, 17-year-old kid, I remember that feeling of like thinking PSA just screwed me. And I was talking with somebody else, someone, he's actually retired now, but just, he kind of changed my mindset of it. And that was a big part of my growth of, rather than getting upset, let's figure out a way to capitalize on this. So instead of PSA's killing everybody, the market's doom and gloomed and like everything's over and grading's, they don't know what they're doing and the grading game's over. It's not going to be like this forever because I've already, you've seen it, like I said, it's going up and down. So those were the points where I would go and just spend and spend and spend. I mean, I would spend millions of dollars at shows and online, knowing that PSA is grading, in my opinion, well, they were a grade too low. There weren't half grades back then. So, stuff would be a grade, sometimes 2 grades off. And I just took that opportunity. Sometimes it would last a little longer than I would hope. Like it would go, 5-6 months. And I'm like, shit, like, is this ever going to just, and then there would basically be enough people that complained, enough smart people that would go to Steve Rocky or eventually Joe Orlando at the time and be like, guys, listen, like this just, we know what we're looking at. This isn't right. Like this is way off. And they would kind of do some checks and balances. Some people would talk to the graders and we would kind of come back to a reality of where that line was. And usually we wouldn't come back to the line. It would kind of creep into a little bit too loose. So that stuff down here, like, so then there'd be like a 6-month span where, you're killing it. I mean, just a massive amount of money. And then it would settle back in at that even line. And then eventually, and like, it's been like that for 20 years or 25 years, as far as I can remember, since the late 90s. It's just, it's human grading, right? It's, at the time PSA had 26 to 32 graders. So you're going to have some inconsistencies. Now PSA has 130. The last time I checked, they had 132 graders that they were, through COVID, was I think at their peak, maybe a little more. So like you have 132 different opinions. Like there's going to be,
Consistency issues.
Yeah, for sure. Which is good. Like that's a thing to take advantage of.
Right. Yeah. And there's no shortage of people that do that. All right. We're gonna move on here quickly though. Ankesh, good evening to you. Corey Carr says Koonce. Very nice. Good to see you, Corey. Mike Petty, some direct questions for you right here, Jason. How long have you been involved in conserving cards for profit? Let's just answer that one first. How long have you been involved in conserving cards for profit?
But when conserving?
That's the question. Yeah.
Oh, that's the question. As far as conserving goes, I would say my biggest window of conserving cards was probably in the early 2000s. Beckett was known for grading sheet cut cards. So I was pretty heavily involved with, not pretty heavily, but I mean, I was grading a lot of sheet cut stuff with Beckett. Just I cracked a lot of wax. I cracked a lot of cards out. But as far as conserving, we can get to those questions. But, a lot of that is, a tax on somebody who's been super successful. I'm sure more of these questions will come up. But yeah, it's,
all right.
yeah.
Let's keep going. Tiger Jordan, what's going on? Saturday nights are the best with Jeremy and Sports Cards Live. Don't get to watch too many live days. Always appreciate learning. Well, good to have you, Tiger, and nice to have you in the chat. Hobby Champ says cards are more fun now than during the boom. You can actually buy really great stuff for great prices instead of overpaying for almost everything. Welcome to the show, Hobby Champs. 90s, what's going on? Collector's Dreams. First National was 92. Jeff S says, still a pain in the butt to send cards to PSA for us Canadians. At the shows, it's pretty easy, though. Hobby Champs, curious why Sports Cards Radio continues to implicate Koonce. Be cool if you would clear that up. Yeah, we're going to get to that, Hobby Champs. Definitely respectfully appreciate that. Travis Trail, what's going on? Evan Mathis in the house. We're going to get to you right away. Evan, Sports Cards nonsense. Has Jason ever trimmed a card personally or seen it done personally? Jason.
Do you consider trimming a card off a sheet personally?
Let's say no. Let's say that's an exception.
No, then I haven't. I've taken creases out. I've spoon corn. Taken just like stuff like that. But like I said, I know people. Well, I don't want to say I know because I've never seen anybody trim other than in Evan's tutorial. I saw him in the video trimming, but I've never seen somebody in person trim a card. I've heard similar rumors like everybody else. And the reality is in the, 15, 20 years ago, the guys that were supposedly really good at it, nobody would know who they are anymore. Most of those guys are retired, gone. And like, if you saw them at a show, which they wouldn't be at right now, they're probably retired on a beach. Nobody would know who those guys are. But like, I'm not going to say any names because like I said, I don't know. Like I know the same things that other people know. Like, hey, that person is really successful grading. How do they do it? I hear the rumors, but like I've never seen them trim a card. So for me to say that, I'm not going to say yes, this person's trimmed a card because I have no idea.
All right. GC says, will Koonce agree to a grip strength contest versus Mike Geo at the National? To which Mike Geo says any day of the week. So go for it. But I got to tell you, do it sitting down. I did it sitting down, hit like 140. Then I did it standing up, hit like 120. So do it sitting down. There's a tip for you, Jason, if you're going to do it.
I've got a little. I mean, I'll try it. I've never done it, but Mike looks like he's got a little bit of muscles. So let's go for it. It'll be fun.
I'm sure you'll do just okay. What's up, Cards AH? Sports Card Professor, looking forward to this No Holds Barred Royal Rumble sports card discussion. Tiger Jordan wants to know what % of your crack and submit strategy to PSA came from cracking BGS slabs?
So I don't want to talk negatively about any grading companies. I think that cracking Beckett cards is a big mistake, especially vintage. I would be very careful cracking vintage Beckett cards. I'd be very careful cracking a lot of higher dollar Beckett cards in general. I would definitely try to measure them, and I would recommend strongly against cracking high dollar Beckett cards. Is what I would say about that.
Okay, good. Michael Ham says PSA's inconsistent grading cannot be inconsistent. Plus, they state all their graders are expert. We know that's not true. All hail Tag. Thanks, Michael Ham, on behalf of Tag Grading. Cards AH, where's PSA right now? I feel like grading is a bit harder, or at least for modern. Jason, your thoughts on where they're at in the cycle of, grading more difficult, grading easier, more difficult, easier.
Yes, like I said, in the last couple of years, like from what I've seen on eBay, stuff looks a little tighter, and from I've talked to some people and it's tighter. I've probably sent in like 100 cards in the last couple, so I'm like a bad, for like one of my personal stuff. What I can tell you is I sent in some 86 flares, and not to like I'm a very knowledgeable with 86 flare. We can talk about, I've cracked a lot of wax, and 86 flare. When I'm sending in like cheap commons for 10s, I would usually shoot 50 to 70% 10s, not on the really hard guys, but just the guys that were always, $150. So, a little during the pandemic or after they opened back up, I sent in, I think 40 86 flares that to me were all 10 shots. And I went 0 for 40. And it was under another name. So it had nothing to do with, by the way, another question, the sports car radio guys that it cracks me up. Someone sent me a link. They said I was banned from PSA. Another blatant lie. I've never been banned from PSA. You can ask Rocky, you can ask Joe Orlando, you can ask Nat. Like, never been banned from PSA. It was just a blatant, silly comment. So yeah, I'd submitted some stuff during the pandemic through someone else just because, they were getting a better rate than I was because I lost I used to have killer rates, and we can talk about that too because people will be really interested to hear what my rates were back in the day. But in these 86 flares that I would normally shoot 50, 60%, they were 8s and 9s, and that just shows you right there. I was expecting, 20, 30, 10. So to me, that was, they're definitely being tighter right now.
All right. Well, thanks for your opinion on that. Mark Santucci, tip of the mitt, guys. Welcome to the show. And John Wee says basketball should be the competition for collectors, not grip strength. Fair comment there, John Wee of Center Stage app. Welcome to the show. All right, guys. So Leighton Sheldon has just joined us. Jason, we're going to bring him on for about 5-10 minutes, see what's going on there. And then, actually what we're going to do is we're going to bring Leighton on and we're going to talk about the Evan Mathis video. I mentioned to Evan, who's watching right now, that we would get to him in a few minutes, and we're going to talk about the video. And I'd like to get both of your opinions on some of these things. Leighton, give me the thumbs up if you're ready to pop on. Thumbs up is there. Leighton, good to see you. You guys know each other. Say a quick hello, and then let's keep on rolling here, all right?
What's going on, Jason? How are you?
What's up, buddy? How are you?
Hey, Jeremy. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. Good to see you, Leighton. Thanks for joining. All right, guys, so here's what we're going to talk about. First of all, Evan Mathis releases his video, the how-to on card trimming. I want to get both of your opinions. Why is he coming out publicly now, putting this on TikTok, and really dominating the hobby content for the last week or so, because of that video? Leighton, let's get your thoughts first, then we'll go to you, Jason.
Sure. Did you ask me, Jeremy, first, you said? Sure. So I don't know Evan very well. I did hear through the grapevine that he was, starting a new company. And so is it related to trying to get press for his new company? You really have to ask Evan. I don't know. It does seem to me that, he was certainly trying to get attention, and he clearly did that. And so if it's for a different motive, I really couldn't tell you. But if he was trying to get attention, he was definitely successful.
What about you, Jason? Any thoughts?
Yeah, so I have a really strong opinion on this. So Evan, kind of took a few years off of cards to play poker and do all that fun stuff. And about 2 years ago, he started working on a website called Cardseer. It's actually a pretty awesome website. I think he's going to launch in a few months. But he was kind of out of the hobby for 2 years playing poker, working on this website. I don't know if it was the right approach or not to get everyone's attention, but he clearly was trolling everybody, and he wanted everybody to talk about him, and he's doing that is happening. Like, he's definitely has everybody's attention now, and it's for better or worse, when he launches this website, his name is going to be out there now. And like I said, I love the website. It's a good website. He can tell you more about it if you ever have him on, but I definitely think this was a marketing ploy. But once again, like, I don't want to speak on other people's behalf. Like, that's just my opinion.
Fair enough. Had you talked to him either? I guess you hadn't, Leighton. Jason, do you have a relationship with Evan Mathis? Did you talk to him leading up to that video being released?
No, Evan and I talk like maybe like we go in spurts. Like Leighton, can you mute it?
Yeah, sorry. I'm down the street. I'm in the streets of New York City, man. It's crazy.
Evan and I go on these where we'll talk every 3 or 4 months. We'll talk sometimes, every 6 months. So we talk, not that much, but we didn't talk leading up to that for probably a few months. And then a few days later after the video, he just sent me a text and said, "It's amazing how people's imaginations can run wild from a picture." And then we were just laughing at that, how people. So yeah, that was our conversation.
All right, Leighton, I want to ask you, the video comes out and everyone's talking about it. How does this impact you? You're as you claim, a professional baseball card treasure hunter. You've got Just Collect, you got Vintage Breaks. Was this something that you felt would impact your business? Does this cast a shadow on the vintage hobby, the vintage and modern hobby? How do you feel this is going to impact guys like you that do what you do, and really the overall collecting hobby since this video has come out?
Sure. So, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, when I buy cards, whether it be they're graded or they're ungraded, I'm really not going to take a different approach, frankly, because of Evan's video or anyone else's video. I use my experience to dictate how I'm going to handle transactions. And so as far as like the hobby overall, I'm not able to tell you that, but I would say, and it may sound a little strange, but at the end of the day, like, for example, when I buy collections, I often buy collections from people that, let's say, like, they inherit it and it's been in the same family for 100 years. Jeremy, those are some of the hardest collections to buy because they're not educated about the market. And so I know this might sound strange, but I would rather have the high-end buyers of our industry know the pitfalls now versus later when things get really serious. Sorry, I'm on the streets of New York City. This is nuts.
Keep going. Keep talking.
And so I just feel like, listen, educated either consumer who's purchasing, an educated consumer who's selling. I just think in the end, yes, for example, like when I buy, if someone's educated, I might pay more, but it's a lot easier for a transaction. And so if someone, for example, is on the fringe of coming into our marketplace or our hobby and spending, millions of dollars on high-grade vintage cards, I'd rather have them know on the front end to talk to the experts of the hobby, meaning the lead graders of PSA, SGC, or Jason's company ISA, right? Or any of like the head dealers or the lead dealers that kind of know, like, even when looking at cards in graded holders, when something maybe looks a little bit peculiar to them or they're not comfortable. And so I just think in general, education is best, even though it's like a little uncomfortable, right? Not everyone necessarily understands Evan's rationale or understands why he released it. But at the end of the day, I think that knowledge in any industry or any discipline is key. And so I'd rather have people, understand, like, hey, be on the lookout. If you're uncomfortable, don't make a purchase. But the reality of it is third-party grading, whether it be one company or another that you prefer, I believe has helped everyone, meaning from the collectors to the casual dealers to the investors, make a better educated, purchase. And so, that's where I'm coming from. I hope that continues and people just, will continue to ask questions, even if they're difficult. And ultimately, in the end, when the dust settles, it's going to be better for everyone.
Should the grading companies be hiring, if they could, or at least having them on retainer or as consultants, card trimmers? Because the card trimmers, people who actually trim cards, the way that Evan Mathis showed in his video or whatever strategies other trimmers are using, should these grading companies be hiring these people or having these people consult, at least looking at certain cards? Because would they not be able to? And I'm looking at a comment from Evan Mathis himself right over here. He says the lead experts in the hobby are the trimmers. They know edges of cards better than anyone by a mile. So shouldn't they be working for grading companies?
I mean, I would turn that around on you, Jeremy, as you work for one of the grading companies. I don't know, but I would say, like, hey, listen, if you're trying to figure out and prevent nefarious behavior and they think that that's a good move, like, I think that sounds reasonable. But out of the three of us, I'm not someone who owns a grading company or works for a grading company, so I don't know that I'm the best person to ask.
Fair. What about you, Jason? What do you think about that question?
What was the exact question?
Should the grading companies have card trimmers as experts on staff or as consultants to help identify trim cards, because as Evan Mathis says on the comment right here, they know the edges of cards better than anyone by a mile. And I think he's including human graders in that anyone.
Absolutely. Like, you know, the more knowledge, the better. I think the only issue is if you look at stuff from the 90s to now, it looks like the experts have become so good that it almost seems undetectable. So I don't know how much that'll truly help. Like maybe AI will help. Maybe I think, you know, and I've talked with a lot of some of the biggest collectors, and like it seems over the past 20 years, and like we've always been, they know that there's funny business that goes on. You know, it's like it's not like a total pure business. Like every big card in one way, whether it's, you know, a corner laid down, it's very rare a card just comes out and goes into a semi-rigid and go like, so it's really up to somebody to kind of figure out on a 1 to 10 scale, you know, where the line is for that person. So yes, like bringing somebody, you know, an expert on would help. I don't know if it would help a ton, just because, like I said, PSA has 132 graders. Every time one of these, you know, Evan's video or even like the blowout boards initially, like, you know, maybe there was, I don't know, 1,000 people trimming cards. They saw those videos and now they're like, or the message boards in 2019 or whatever, and they're like, oh wow, this is possible. And a lot of these younger people coming in that have a different moral code than some of the older guys that are like, this, you know, these people who do this should, you know, have their heads chopped off. It seems like, looking at the comments of Evan's video, a lot of the younger generation are like, hey, what's the big deal? And they look at these blowout forums, and I think rather than being like disgusted, like, you know, you and I know a lot of people are, they kind of look at it like, wait, this is possible. So I think the more we talk about it, the better, but also you're just going to create more and more trimmers. Like that's just the way it is. Like, so I think during the pandemic, like we're probably 10, you know, and the newer stuff is, you know, it comes all different sizes. Like, you know, newer stuff is, there's no way to detect new, like you can detect vintage. I could detect vintage. Like I know pretty good, like what's been played with and what's not. The newer stuff, I couldn't tell. Like if it measures and looks right, and at ISA, like we're gonna hold or something, and you know, as long as it's, you know, if it's short, we're gonna kick it or look at it and figure out why, you know, did this come min size from the factory, or, you know, does it look wavy? But in general, the new stuff, like nobody can detect the new stuff. It is what it is, and we've created, you know, probably way more than we've gotten rid of in the last couple of years.
All right. Okay. Appreciate that. Leighton, let's finish off with you here, and just let everybody know, if you're not yet following Leighton on Instagram at Leighton_Sheldon or just_collect. He's got his podcast, Trading Card Therapy. Leighton, thanks for your support. Anything you'd like to shout out before you go get back to your action-packed evening in New York City?
Well, one of these days I'll give you a live look in on them. It'll probably be potentially more exciting than some of the card stuff. But no, I appreciate you having me on. You know, I'm going to try to listen to the video later on after you guys finish and stuff. Thanks for having me. It was good seeing you, Jason.
Be safe out there, Leighton. Be safe in New York.
Thanks, Leighton. All right, Jason, let's keep on going here. Vintage Card Collector has this question. What are your thoughts on the percentage of high-grade vintage that has been trimmed? Some people are throwing out really high numbers. I heard 80%. I think that was a mistake. I think it was meant to be quoted as 20%. What do you think the percent of vintage, high-grade vintage that is actually trimmed? What's your gut?
I think it's a sliding scale based on value and year. So I think if you start off in 92, you know, you're going to start off here, and as they learn, you know, it kind of gets a little better. It's a cat and mouse game between that. You know, it's like they get better, the card doctor get better, the card grader, you know, pick it up. So I think in the 90s it was pretty bad. Also based off of value, like in the 90s, the higher dollar stuff, there's a good chance that it's been played with and messed around. And I think generally, as time's gone on, PSA's gotten better. But the problem is, when you have this core group for many years of 25 to 30 graders that get more and more educated, When that expands to 50 graders, all of a sudden you have, and I've experienced this at ISA, we have, 5 or 6 graders now, and I've had 25 people come in to try to, it's like, I can't, you just don't pick it up. And when it's a really hard thing to teach. So when you're adding graders and you go from 25 to 50 to 100 to 132 or whatever they're at now, stuff's going to get through a lot of these guys. It might not get through the 10 guys, the 20 guys that are the veterans. It's obviously going to be easier to get, a cheaper card through than a Hank Aaron rookie, because a Hank Aaron rookie is going to get looked at by multiple people. So I guess overall the answer to that question is, if it's a really old serial number in the 90s, I would be a little more leery, cautious. If that's something that is just like a diehard for you that I do not want guaranteed a trim card and a holder, you have a better chance, I think, on a newer label to avoid that.
Ricky here says, I heard that you are terrified of the sports card radio twins. Any truth to that?
You mean the guy, the kid who threatened to murder me?
I don't know anything about that, but they're brothers that run the sports card radio website and channel and everything. Yeah,
someone sent me a thing. So he threatened to murder me. I don't want to. I mean, so they're in the affiliate and clickbait business and stuff, and they send people my way, and I'm one of the top earners in that. I know they'd probably do well with it too. Hopefully, they're making hundreds and hundreds of thousands. I think it's amazing that I've been put in a situation to be at, this peak of the business where other people can make a profit off of, to me, I look at them as a National Enquirer, 10% truth, 90% excitement of just getting people riled up. I watch some of their stuff, cracks me up, but no, not worried about them. I don't really want to talk too much about them because I don't want to send business their way for their clicks. But if they want to send business my way, and every time they talk about me, I pick up a bunch of followers and stuff, and I'll make money off my affiliate, and revenue off that. So yeah, not really. I don't really look at. I don't look down.
All right, we'll come back. I have a couple more questions regarding those guys coming up here. ZJS says, would Koonce be open to taking a lie detector test at the National? I'd be willing to pay for it.
Maybe, yeah. I don't know. I've always seen that those things are probably, yeah, let's try it. I think that'd be fun.
All right, so there you go. That'd be fun.
Let me ask. I want to talk. I want to make sure they're not 80% true. I want to make sure they're 99.99999. I don't want there to be something where someone asks me a weird in between question, and because I said, I cut down sheets in the early 2000s. I don't want that to come off as just is cutting down sheets, trimming card. I don't know, but yeah, we'll talk about that. Message me, we'll set it up.
I don't think cutting a sheet is trimming. I think trimming means that you are trimming a card that was previously cut from the sheet, either by the factory or maybe by someone else after. Probably by the factory, actually, only. I think that's what we mean by trimming cards. So straight up, are you is Jason Koonce a card trimmer?
I don't trim cards. I've prepped cards. And by prepping cards, I mean, so, if you have let's just say you have a corner with there's some fuzz on it. I think you can kind of touch that corner, move the fuzz. There's a big difference between taking the whole edge off, spooning a corner, pressing a corner. There's a lot of stuff that you can do without trimming a card. Watching Evan's video, I honestly think he's trolling. I've never seen Evan trim other than that video, but to me, that setup looks like there's no way that would work. So I don't know, maybe it would, grabbing a paper cutter and trimming, I don't know. So someone just said cutting sheets is trimming, cutting sheets again. I don't think they understand that, Beckett was openly, we grade sheet cut cards. That was a thing. So, yeah. So I think I get a lot of hate for that because I'm pretty transparent. Most people, if they wanted to say I didn't do anything, they would say, no, I didn't do anything. No, I cut down a lot of sheets for a couple of years. But honestly, I was making way more money cracking stuff out. And Beckett's stuff kind of lean where, there was a point when Beckett was way over PSA and it made sense. And then Beckett kind of died off in PSA, so I focused more on cracking PSA.
I just, Kahana, quit it with the swearing in my chat, please, or I'm going to just have to block you. Family show, no swearing, please. Okay. Yeah. We had cutting sheets is trimming. We have cutting sheets is scummy. And then we have cutting sheets is awesome. Courtesy of Evan Mathis. Collector's Dream says Honus Wagner PSA was sheet cut. Mike Petty says
no, it wasn't.
No, it was just oversized, right?
It was oversized. It wasn't sheet cut.
We'd see that's how things get misunderstood a lot. Petty here says cutting a sheet is cutting a sheet. If you have a cutter, why not trim the regular cards? Are you cutting the sheets with scissors? If you're spooning corners, then you cut it after. And it's full of assumptions, but probably some that are somewhat reasonable there. Fat Snacks thinks this is amazing. Welcome to the show, Fat Snacks. Okay.
Yeah, and cutting the sheets, a lot of people don't know this, is like in the 80s, Topps was so overwhelmed, like they would consign dealers out. Like they had dealers that they would pay, they would ship them pallets of sheets, and they'd be like, can you cut these sheets down for us and then distribute them? So like there's a lot of clean Topps cards in, from the 80s and maybe late 70s, but like that are sheet cut, secondary market, and then on the market is normal cards. Like a lot of people don't know that there's a lot of sheet cut cards that are, like vending fresh that, were not done by Topps. They were done by, third parties and then distributed, months later.
Yeah. I always say a sheet cut card is a card because they're all sheet cut, but some are sheet cut by the manufacturer and some are sheet cut aftermarket by someone who came into a sheet and cut it in their basement or their lab or their workspace or wherever. And then, there's a comment here. Travis says, I see zero difference between sheet cutting and trimming. I see a complete difference between the two. I just think that's a naive way to look at it because a sheet cut card is a card that was not cut by the manufacturer. So if you're not, so that's a completely different thing. It's completely different than trimming a card that was pulled by the manufacturer, that was inserted and then pulled by the manufacturer and the customer. Mathis said no difference. Both are fine. I don't care when the sheet was cut. Go ahead, Jason. Were you going to jump in?
No, and a lot of people have that opinion. Like I've talked to a lot of collectors, and a lot of people do feel that way. They don't care when the sheet was cut as long as it was done right. I think with Beckett, a lot of it was pretty obvious because a lot of stuff was left so big. A lot of OPG stuff was cut with a non-OPG edge. It was pretty obvious too with Beckett.
Here, Fat Snack says Koonce is blinking 100 times a minute. Can you address that, please?
Yeah, I mean, if we want to get into some real detail, another reason why I think I would be a very bad trimmer is, so I was born a very small, full-term, just under 4-pound baby. I had a lot of neurological issues. If somebody see me at a show, they know that I have a minor case of Tourette's with my neck and twitch, which is also connected to my eyes and my whole body. I was in the hospital for many, many weeks and months as a kid. So I have a lot of neurological issues from that. So people that know me for a long time know that I have this. So that's connected to the eyes, to the neck. So yeah, I think if I was using one of Evan's paper cutters, it would probably be like, I do have great I have one of the best eyes in the game. Like if you ask any auction house collector deal, like a lot of people would say that. So there's just, for me, a lot more money in cracking stuff out than there was, trimming cards, which I don't think I was very good at it. When I had cut sheets down, it wasn't the best work. So, so there's the detailed answer of why I blink 1,000 times.
I think that's a fair answer. Evan Mathis says it'd be dangerous and expensive if you were to get into that business then. So I want to get back to Sports Card Radio. I know you don't want to send them any clicks, but I'm happy to. I don't think I'm sending them many. They get several more than I do. But they have a video they just put it out called Meet the Trimmers. I actually watched it today just to do it. And there's a piece in that video on you. So I want to know, Jason, how is it that you got on, you keep referring back to sheet cutting cards. Is that really is that why you got on to their Meet the Trimmers video? Is that why you're listed on their website? There's like 8 or 10 different guys on there. And you're smack dab in the middle of that group of people. How did you end up on that list? To the best of your knowledge, I guess.
So I think it's a lot more people on that list, and there's several people I think that are deceased on that list. But I think it was just a list of some of the top submitters when it came out. But so the funny thing is like literally like they put the list on their website, right? And then somebody posted the list on some of the forums. and then they refer back to their list. So like literally like the only source, like even if you watch that video, it's like a 45-second clip. Like they don't actually say anything other than, you know, hey, this guy like is, rumored to, and then he like pulls out a video and threatens to murder me. But like he doesn't really say anything other than this guy's a trimmer. Like he doesn't show any evidence. Like I would say, like I've graded over a million cards. Like there's a lot of other people out there with tens of thousands of before and after pictures or whatever. Like show me a card that I've trimmed. I want to know, am I good? And other than just the hearsay of like, hey, because everything they say like stems back from their original list that they posted, even through the blowout board. Like if you look through some of the forums, like everybody resorts back to, oh, he's on this list from Sports Card Radio. Like, but there's nothing else other than that. And probably maybe it comes from me, sheet cutting cards, because like we've just seen in the chat, like 5 people get all worked up over it. So over the past 15 years, 20 years, like it seems like there's a lot of people that think cutting sheets is trimming cards. So maybe that's what it is. So if that's the case, then I trim cards. But I don't think trimming a sheet down or cutting a sheet down for that is trimming cards.
Okay, well, we'll take that as the answer. Buzzy says dishonesty causes anxiety, which can lead to twitching or incessant blinking, but so can a neurological issue. So, but thanks, Buzzy, for pointing out other potential reasons, I suppose.
And Buzzy saying that though is kind of just more spreading rumors. And like if you go to some sources of people that have known me for the past 30 years, and any of those people, even people that dislike me or whatever, and which whatever, will acknowledge that I have this issue. So like this is how stuff happens, where people just start snowballing rumors, and it's like I'm very calm and like I'm not nervous talking to you, Jeremy. So
no,
like
I know. And Jason, listen.
And I didn't need to open up about my child, about like, it's of what, the issues of that. So like, to me, that's just a silly thing. And like, I'm here to answer real questions. So like to make that Buzzy is just, I don't know, like it's an insecure comment, and like, it is what it is.
Exactly. And I can say just to the audience and to you, Jason, I met, again, I've seen you at the Nationals. We've never chatted. I knew who you were. But when at the Mint Collective, I believe it was the Mint Collective this past year, we chatted in person, like face to face. And I noticed that you had a twitch, and there was no reason to be nervous around me then. And then we talked about it the other day, and you mentioned it to me. So, I mean, I think that's reasonable. And I can definitely corroborate that's the, I haven't seen your medical records, but I noticed that anyway, let's move along from there for a moment here. I had this question. Are you card porn?
Oh man, I wish I was. I know who he is. I've chatted with him a bunch. I go back and forth. Like every time he pisses me off with some of the comment, then he so basically, like I said, I'm not going to talk about other people. I'm not going to, release who he is, because he chooses to be anonymous, and for better or worse, sometimes I think it's annoying, but he has another really successful business. And what he does is he does a lot of his beta testing through card porn. So for his other business, like he's a very smart guy. He'll do a lot of unique, whether he's stirring up the pot or whatever he's doing, a lot of that is to figure out comments and reactions on social media to help out his main business. But no, I'm not card porn. I do know who he is. And yeah, I mean, that's, I don't know.
Yeah. I think the anonymity is fading. A lot of people seem to know who's behind card porn nowadays.
Yeah,
so.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, so we talked about Sports Card Radio. We talked a bit about card porn. What are your thoughts on the hobby watchdog content that is, there's no shortage of it right now. Some of these guys do a great job. Some of them a lesser great job. What are your thoughts on the hobby watchdog content, and how important is it to the hobby that these guys are out there doing their thing?
When it's accurate, I think it's really good. I think the problem is people maybe start off for the right reasons, and then they start to get a little bit of affiliate money, which can be really good with clicks, or I don't think YouTube pays a ton, but there's some affiliate companies that pay well. Maybe they get some sponsors, and like views turn into money, and to get more views, titles, the things you talk about, you push the line. Like, obviously, like I said, I brought up those guys before and said National Enquirer, like, love them or hate them, and a lot of people watch them and don't like them. Like, they get a lot of views because they're out there and wild, and like, I think sometimes they're funny. Like, they say silly shit. But I think there's a very thin line between helping the hobby versus, like, people need to know that they're in it to make money. Like, this is a business for them, 100%. Like, they want it. Maybe not for card porn. I don't think card porn makes any money. He makes enough money in his other business, but like a lot of people, they're trying to build their subscriber list. They're trying to make money off this. Like, I don't think they're doing this, maybe because they love the hobby. But I think even if it starts that way, it turns into a revenue stream. I've seen something where I've been flipping through, like, I think Sports Card Dad, not a lot of followers, but like, he's very upfront. Like, he starts off with, I'm affiliate, like, with this, if you click this link, I'll make money. Like, I think that's super transparent. Like, to me, that's like, okay, cool. Like, I would be more entitled to click a link that you were that upfront. Like, please do that. I get a small piece. If you don't, please, enjoy my content. But, like anything, there's good and bad. I think, yeah, that's my opinion on it.
A couple years ago, actor Rob Go bought a PSA 9 52 Topps Mickey Mantle, $5.2 million, something like that. He paid for it. He got a ton of headlines. He did a lot of the podcast circuit and that. What do you know about that card? Is that card trimmed? Was that Evan Mathis's card that you know?
That was Evan Mathis.
That was. So I don't know. Not that Evan Mathis would remember, but I held that card at Evan Mathis's booth at the National in 2017. Maybe he had the 52 PSA 9, the 53 PSA 10, and I went to his booth and he held them up and he let me hold them, and I took a picture. Actually, he took a picture of me holding them, and then I didn't realize it, but now I guess I do. That card that I held was Evan Mathis's, got sold to Rob Go. Now that Evan Mathis puts out the trimming video, I think a lot of people assume that Rob Go's PSA 9 52 Topps Mantle is trimmed. What do you know about that?
Yeah, so I think if it was, it'd be such an amazing story that, Evan, as a 12 or 13-year-old, was able to get this mantle and trim it and sell it for 25 or 30,000, and then leave the hobby, and then 20 years later come back and then repurchase the card for 2.8 million, would be a pretty wild story. But the reality is that card was graded in the mid 90s, so see, Evan's he's trolling because he thinks it's his guys. You need to check out Card, love or hate him. Like, this website's pretty cool. I'm not invested, but I love this website, Cardseer, and I think he's trying to get attention for Cardseer. And that's why he's, but the funny thing is a lot of people, once again, I've seen like direct 100% people are like, hey, Evan trimmed that 52 mantle. And like then people hear that, and then it just starts snowballing again. And all of a sudden you have a guy who's like, would bet his wife that Evan trimmed that 52 mantle, when it's just not true, and it's in the 53 mantle he had. I've seen that, like, that was one of the most natural, gorgeous 10s I've ever seen. I mean, that card was amazing. What did Evan say?
He said, you won't invest in Cardseer, but thanks for the shout out. That's pretty funny.
I'm spread so thin right now. I just
Sports Cards Nonsense said that Rob just sold that card. But I think we've established now that particular PSA 9 52 Topps Mantle was not trimmed by Mathis. Maybe somebody else, we don't know, but certainly was not trimmed by Evan Mathis, because even one of the most honest guys I've ever met in the hobby here, Matt Rocker, 56 Topps guy, said it was graded before Evan had it. Evan then lets us know that Levi Bleem, who's got the 707 Sports Cards, a huge booth at National every year, says that he graded that card many years ago. So that's
it was Levi's card. I remember it was always in a showcase. And it was like, he never wanted to sell it to me. Like, when the card was worth $500,000, I'd offer him $450,000, and then he'd say, I want $500,000. And then I'd say, okay, how about $500,000? And now he's $600,000. Like, every time I would kind of like agree to his price to buy it, he'd raise it another $50,000. And then, finally, like, he got an absurd number at the time for it and decided to let it go.
Okay, well, good. And Professor here says, I think Jeremy announced he will be teaming up with Sports Card Dad. Just to clarify, Dennis Zender, who goes by PC with DPZ on Instagram and was still hosts a collector's series, used to be on the Luca Nation network. Now it's on the Sports Card Dad network. I've teamed up with Dennis. We're starting a new show called Taking Stock, and our first episode will be this Monday, and then it's going to fall on Tuesdays. After that, it'll stream to my channel, Sports Cards Live, and to the Sports Card Dad channel as well. That's what that's about, Professor. But thanks for asking. All right, here's a question I got, Jason, when I was soliciting for questions. It reads, and this one came from our friend Matt Rocker. It says, I know you love Jackie Robinson Leaf rookies. Do you have any examples you know are trimmed or altered in your collection? Does knowing that prevent you from adding them to your PC? I'm curious about people's comfort levels with having known altered cards in their PC.
I have a lot of them, and yes, I have some that I definitely think are trimmed. It doesn't bother me too much. I'm very finicky on centering, so I would rather have, and this is, people are going to hate this too, but like I would rather have a perfectly trimmed 7 that's dead centered, or 6 or whatever. Maybe in like the super high grades, who knows? But like I'd rather have a dead centered 6 that, you know, maybe is full size, but somebody did trim it, versus a legit 6 that's centered 90-10. So that's where I stand on that. Because I just understand that it is what it is. Like, this is the hobby. Like, it's, to me, graded cards is a necessary evil in the hobby. Like, a lot of people want to just get away from graded cards, which is the most silliest thing ever, because if they think that there's inconsistencies in grading, like, and you go back to raw cards, then you're in the wild, wild west. Like, people don't know that in the 80s, like, you know, there's guys like Steve Timmons, or they call him Steve Trimmons, who would, you know, like, nobody would knew as well. Like, he would literally, you know, cut stuff and charge whatever, because he's like, this is a mint card, and nobody would know. So when it's in a holder, like, I'm assuming PSA, you know, it was a high enough quality to make it into a holder, and it, you know, it doesn't bother me. Like, I don't want a blatantly ugly, you know, early 90s trim card. Like, that's something I would not want in my collection. But if it was full size, nice card, if it was centered, I'd rather have that than something that's 90-10.
Yeah, I understand that perspective. Mine is a bit different. I'd rather have a beautiful trimmed card in a you know, a slab, whether it's PSA or SGC, that says altered, or I don't even want to say altered. I want it to say trimmed right on the label. But I'd rather have a trimmed, you know, 52 tops Mickey Mantle that presents like a 7 or an 8, but is trimmed and it says trimmed on the slab, versus having, you know, an ugly 6 or an ugly 7 or a beat up 1, 2, or 3 for that matter. I'd rather have that for myself, but I only would want it if it said it. I think, you know, let's get into this for a second now. You know, there's the whole issue on, is trimming okay, which we know it isn't. Well, we know, I won't speak for you. I feel it isn't. I'm not a fan of trimmed cards. I would rather not have any in my collection, unless it's a 52 tops Mantle, which I just can't afford any copy really. So I'll you know, you take what you can get. But I've always thought that, you know, if you're going to trim a card, if you're, you know, Evan Mathis, the new poster boy for this, if you're Evan Mathis and you're going to trim a card and then you're going to send it in for grading, I don't think there's a problem with that. If you tell the grading company, I trimmed this card, please put trim. It's all about disclosure. I think disclosure is one of the things that has to be mentioned when it comes to trimming cards. Now, I'm going to go further with this, and I want your opinion, but for the chat, I think disclosure makes it almost okay, but I still don't get there. And the reason I don't get there completely is because what if I have my 52 tops Mantle that looks like a 7, but is trimmed and PSA identified it as trimmed at that time? Then I crack it out and I send it back and I don't tell them it was trimmed. So disclosure only helps to the extent that you're the owner of the card. If you disclosed it and you own the card, disclosure is a wonderful thing. But as soon as you dispose of that card and someone else gets it, now the disclosure loses its value, because that person can crack it out and do something with it, like try and, you know, submit it again and not be honest about the true state of the card. All that said, what are your thoughts on first of all, is trimming okay by you? Are like, I know what you just said about rather having this card than that, but is trimming okay by you? And how do you feel about the disclosure angle? Does that kind of does that for a known and admitted trimmer, does that get them out of the hobby doghouse if they disclose it?
So two-part, yeah, answer the first part. I think on the spectrum of like, working on a card, I'm okay with a lot leading up. Like, yeah, trimming is definitely probably crossing the line. Everything leading up to that, like, I even like, these, and I had no idea how to do it, but watching like these Kurt's card care video, like how to take these surface scratches out of Bowman Chrome. I wish I knew how to do that, because there's a lot of stuff I had and there's people that lose their mind over that. Like, I think that's okay as long as it's back to a refinished, product. But I think trimming's probably crossing the line. Most stuff leading up to that is fine. But that's where you kind of come into this weird argument of like, everyone has a different opinion, and definitely seeing that in like some of the newer people in Evan's chat. Like, I was actually shocked at the amount of people in the comments that were like totally okay with trim. They're like, yeah, like you're just refurbishing it. It's like, you go buy a house and you put new siding on it. Like, you don't need to disclose that you put new siding to sell the house. So it definitely seemed like there was a lot of people that were okay with it. I think the people that have been around for forever are less okay with it, and mostly okay with like removing a crease and stuff. And then you have your total purists that are like, I want my card, untouched. The second part is, I think if you send a card to PSA and you don't, I don't think you're required to disclose anything. Like, it's their job to catch it. Now, getting it back in your collection, like, you can do whatever you want with it, but that does create the opportunity of like, let's say you die. Now that card gets sold in an estate sale. Now it's free game for the next person to do whatever they want and not disclose. But that's not just in card grade. That's literally in everything. Like, there's every part of the hobby, like from the moment of inception to the whole line, like at any point, like whether it's a patch card, one of the biggest things is like, we don't grade patch cards at ISA. And the reason is the people that replace the patches, you take like a plain white patch and put in like some sick 4-colored patch. The people that do that are 100%. Like, PSA, nobody can detect it. So I just chose that we're just not going to grade that, because their system with that is flawless. It's perfect. You can't take it. So if somebody wanted a super cool, crazy patch card for their collection, that's cool. But like, you've literally like recreated the card. They sell that. The next person, they're going to sell. So like, every part of manipulation is, once it goes to the next tier, like, you're asking every single person to acknowledge, the history of that card. And I don't think that's realistic.
You mentioned the fake patches, and that's something that has been bothering me for almost 20 years now. I went as far as creating a website in about 2007 called Fake Patch Report. I just couldn't keep up with all the fake patch reports I was receiving, was going to university, so I couldn't continue it. But I stopped collecting RPAs, rookie patch autos, because of the fake patch epidemic. I knew I had fake, me and all my collector friends, we knew we had fake patches in our collection. Just like right now, I'm certain I have a trimmed card in a PSA slab in my collection. There's really no doubt in my mind that I do. I've got hundreds of these things, vintage and some mid-high grade stuff. I'm sure I have trimmed cards in my collection. Do you think that by Evan Mathis's video coming out, bringing so much attention to this topic right now, which is a good thing that there's attention on it, because it's a real issue in our hobby and people need to be informed and know about it. So just like I have stopped collecting RPAs because I don't trust patches and RPAs. So what about with high grade vintage? Like, I have concern personally about purchasing high grade vintage anymore moving forward. Now, it's not like I'm new and I just realized this was an issue now, but it's, much more in my face over the last couple of weeks. And I'm thinking to myself moving forward, maybe I should be more diligent and go for mid grade or low grade. And to me, that is a signal that if I'm thinking that way, has to be hundreds, if not thousands of other people also thinking that way. And that could do damage to the market values of the cards of a lot of big investors in the space, a lot of longtime collectors. The biggest of all collectors could be thinking this way too. New people might think this way. The people that have huge valuable collections right now, when they go to sell them, might be in for a surprise that it's going to be harder to find buyer or get a bidding war on your cards because people are just too nervous to buy them. I think that's a risk that the hobby is now faced with. What are your thoughts on that?
I don't at all. I think this is just another blip in the road of somebody bringing it up that, unless Evan keeps doing videos over and over again, it'll spike, like it did in popularity and then it's just going to go away. And the reason I know that is like, this isn't the first time this is brought up. Like, this has been an ongoing thing for 25 years. Like this, people have talked about all this stuff many, many, many times. I know a lot of the big collectors, and like there's collectors that have come to me and they're like, hey, you get great, great grades with PSA. Here's an 8.5. Like, can you get this in? I don't care what I just don't want it. I don't care what you do. Just can you get them? Like, that's not really how it works. But like, they don't care. A lot of guys, some do, but like most of the big collectors I know, like they kind of already know that, there's a chance that some stuff in their collection's trim, but a lot of people are just holder collectors. Hey, like it or not, a lot of people, like, especially set registry guys that are just craving that next grade up to boost their set numbers. Like they don't care at all. Like they just want the numbers. So I think a lot of it is just, you could shit, I don't want to swear, you could shit in a holder and like, it is what it is. Like people are still going to buy the holder. I think there's way too many people out there that, that are going to take, I don't think there's enough people that are going to just make a stand and say, oh, I'm just done buying. Maybe they do. Maybe they start buying lower grade stuff. But I don't think it's going to make that big a deal. Because I've seen it where people have freaked out in the past, like, oh,
well, you know what though? I think one of the differences there, Jason, is that back then there weren't this many YouTube channels, active Instagram accounts. Twitter was smaller. Hobby Twitter was smaller. I don't know, man. Like, I hear what you're saying, but things do change over time, and I don't know that I agree because I guarantee you myself, I will not my future purchasing activities, decisions have been changed. Now that's just me. I'm not speaking for anybody else, but I have to think, if I'm thinking that way, some other people, maybe it's only one or two other people, maybe it's 1 or 200, 1,000, I don't know. But I think that times are different now than they were even, pre-pandemic. There's way more content out there. There's way more people tuning in. New people are going to YouTube and Twitter and Instagram to learn about the hobby, as well as their hobby shops and all that. But I wonder. I think this is one of those let's wait and see what happens sort of things. So
I'll just touch one more point on that is a lot of people, there's only so much stuff that people can bump, right? Or upgrade or crack, whatever. Like I said, I think the cracking out game's over. And I think a lot of the people that, I don't know for sure, but like that I think we're trimming cards like that are left the hobby. It's because a lot of that stuff's just not available anymore. And you can't just go buy, you see like I've seen comment, people think you just go buy a 52 Mantle and a 6 and then you trim all 4 sides and it gets a 9. Like, PSA knows what they're doing. And with them, we've talked about them being more difficult lately. I think they're definitely judging more on the side of caution now. There's population report, like that's a real thing. And I think now, like with them being more strict, with them being more, if they even think that something's bad, I think they're kicking it more likely to kick it. So there's going to be less big stuff that come out. So the supply is still so low. You're not going to see, a 52, to get a 52 Mantle 9, like, and I've done this because I've cracked an insane amount of wax. Like you could go to PSA headquarters right now and open a pack of 52 and pull a Mantle and then walk in and submit it. And they'll call it altered stock. Just because if it looks that mint, like they're just erring on the side of caution. So I think with population control, like whatever's out there is out there. Like a lot of it's buried in collections. It's just not coming up. Like a Gretzky OPG 9, like you don't need to worry. Like if you buy one of those, whether it's trimmed or it's not trimmed, like a 9 is worth a decent amount of money. And like, it's not like you need to worry of, 10 more Gretzky 9s coming out in the next couple of years. Like it's just not going to happen. So
is that pop control, or is that they just don't exist?
Both. It's a little bit of both. I mean, the high grade stuff just is very hard to find now. Like most of it has come out of the woodwork. There's still occasional finds and stuff, but the pop control is real. Like if PSA grades, and Beckett has no pop control. Beckett would just sit there and do whatever. But like PSA, like if they grade a Ricky Henderson in a 10, if I showed up the next week with 10 amazing Ricky Hendersons that all deserve 10s, like I'm not getting a 10. Like it's just the way it is.
Isn't that just wrong? Like, isn't the same way that we know that
frustrating.
We know that at least one of the PSA 10 OPG Wayne Gretzky's is pretty weak. Like it might not even be a 9 if graded today. Who knows, right? Who really knows? But the fact that there's only 2 of them, and I've seen some pretty nice ones get submitted by other people. And, they're like, well, we're going to try again. And, it's just they can never get that. It's been stuck at 2 for how long? It was stuck at 1 for a long time. It's stuck at 2 now.
Yeah.
Like why won't they give another 10 if they're seeing 10 quality cards come through? Is it to protect the owners of the first 2? I.e., is that a pop control thing? Or are they what's the motivation of the grading companies not to give the appropriate grade to a card? And by appropriate grade, I'm talking specifically right now about an OPG Gretzky.
Yeah, I don't think like high-end agree. I don't think they're just flowing into PSA. So like, me walking in saying I have 10
midnight, I've seen like 9s that look nicer than both of the 10s. That's what I'm saying, and I've seen them in hand, not just on screen. I've seen them in hand.
Of course.
And I've seen both. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so, I don't want to toot our horn because I know you have a tag in it. So we put the authentication date on the back of our holders at ISA. And to me, that's very valuable because over the history of PSA, the standards have changed a little bit. Like the card was graded easier in 95 to 97, then it was hard in 2000. Like there was times when stuff was graded easier, graded harder. So now we're in a hard state right now. And I don't know how long. Maybe we'll be in a super hard state forever. And, nothing drives PSA more like crazier or greater when you bring them a card and say, hey, here's a 8. Here's my 8. My 8's way nicer than this. Like, they don't care. Like, they don't want to hear that. They don't want to look at an old card because you're basically telling them, one, you either messed up on this card or you messed up on this card. And to them, it's like, you're calling them out. So to say that, this Gretzky 9 is better than, the 10, yes, we can all agree on that, but like they're not going to give that a 10 based on the fact that it looks nicer than the last 10. It's just the standards for a 10 have changed that it needs to be so out of this world perfect that's the new standard. Probably because, listen, when a 10 Gretzky was graded in the 90s, it was $100,000 card. A lot of money, but not, what's a Gretzky 10 now? 5 million? Like,
probably.
Right. So like
3.75 last time it sold.
Right. So that's, so that's a bigger difference of pulling the trigger on a card, like it's easier to pull a trigger on $100,000. I'm not saying $100,000 is a lot of money. It's not 5 million.
All right. So I'm going to go to some comments right now. First of all, Evan Mathis, thank you for the $10 super sticker. Not sure that the audience would be a fan of me accepting money from you, but I also want to say, I'm sure everybody here has seen or listened to the podcast that Sports Card Nonsense did with Evan. I listened to it yesterday. Great job, by the way, to the Sports Card Nonsense crew on that, and nice job by Evan on there as well. And Evan, there's controversy whether we should be talking about this or not, but of course, I'd love to get Evan on the show at some time and do a little bit of grilling of him myself. But thanks for the $10, Evan. Okay, Hockey Cardboard says SGC labels cards as trimmed, which wish PSA did the same. I do too. Dan the Cardman says grading has been the Wild West in recent years too. Has been forever, but way more exacerbated lately. Yes, I definitely agree with that. Travis said,
I would just like to say, I mean, I've said this a few times, but when you go from 25 graders to 130 graders, experience is important. I mean, like, it's not easy to train. It seems like it is, but it's not. It's very, very difficult to train quality grading. I mean, it's very underestimated.
I'm sure it is. Travis says, I'd rather have a trimmed card that measures correctly than an undersized card that was miscut by factory. See, I think that's a minority opinion right there, or thought, but all the power to you, Travis Trail. T-Dot says it's the authenticity of the item at the end of the day, which matters. And I think that's exactly, we're back to when we were just talking about disclosure and all that. And I definitely agree with that. T-Dot. Evan says, here's your disclosure. If you buy graded cards, you buy trimmed cards. And that's kind of what I think. It's not to say that everybody has trimmed cards in their collection. You know, you might have gotten lucky. You might have 500 graded cards in your collection and I mean grade, I'm talking vintage. You may not have, and it might apply to modern too. I don't mean it doesn't, I'm not saying it doesn't happen in modern, but
That happens more in modern, by the way.
More in modern. So there we go. So there's no doubt, like I said earlier, I'm sure I have at least one trimmed card in my collection. I'm sure everybody here watching that has a graded collection that didn't grade it all themselves and pack pull themselves likely has too. Another comment from Dan the Card Man says, that's probably the best thing to come out of your video, Evan. You know, I ain't a fan, but it's opened the eyes to a lot of people. And that's where I say, like, that's the double-edged sword. I agree with this comment by Dan the Card Man that it's opened a lot of people's eyes. But the other side of that coin is that it's also shown people how to do the dirty. And that's where I think we also have an issue, right?
I definitely think there's going to be an influx of trim cards submitted to PSA in the next few months. And SGC and us, like, people are going to watch that and think, you know, hopefully they don't just go buy some paper cutter and, you know, because they're going to be probably strongly disappointed because PSA is very good. But I think these videos and talking, you know, it's good to talk about it, but it's also the negative side is you're going to have a lot of people that think it's totally okay. And they're going to just start going out and trimming a bunch and ruining a bunch of cards.
Maybe they'll ruin them and they'll be obvious trim jobs. So it I don't know. I've never trimmed a card. Maybe it takes time to get good at it. I mean, Evan's 100-something nail file and what he did there, I was like, really? Like, even the way Evan was touching the cards, I thought, man, this guy's got he's got a set of what on him if he's willing to take those risks and touching the cards. And
if that's how he does it and that works, then we're all in trouble because that looks way too like 1980s step by, I don't know. It looked a little like.
All right, let's keep on going. Let's whip through a few more comments here. Bobby Burrell says that if Beckett knowingly graded sheet cut cards, how can we blame people for cutting sheets? At this point, that would just be simple hobby commerce. I don't like sheet cut cards, so I don't buy Beckett graded slabs. I'm of the exact same position as Bobby here. I don't think there's an issue really with cutting a card from a sheet. As long as you're disclosing it, I don't see an issue. So how do you disclose it? You send it into Beckett because their policy has been to grade sheet cut cards. They don't put it on the label, which I wish they would do. That would like make it so much better for all of us, but they don't do that. And I'd really like to see them start doing that. But in any event, at the end of the day, it's been going on for a long time. And even, when I cover PWCC auctions on their premier auction, I'll look at these cards. I'll say, well, it's a Beckett slab. If you're going to buy this, know that there's a chance that there's maybe a good chance, especially on this one, because it looks so clean, especially, peachy, has no rough cut, perfect edges. There's a good chance that this thing is sheet cut. And if you're like me, Jeremy Lee, and you want your cards pack pulled, then you want to stay away from those.
And the O-Peaches are super obvious. But even 84 Topps football, there was hundreds, if not thousands of those sheets cut down. And most people, the borders are obnoxiously big. You can look at that and tell, it's pretty blatant that it's sheet cut.
Yeah, for sure. All right. 1956 Topps guy here says, registry comment is a good one. Lots of people buying holders. I'm good with my rounded corners. Great registration and strong centering. And that's me exactly, Matt. I love a nice rounded corner on a vintage card. A nice, even natural rounding. To me, that's a thing of beauty and where I'm going to be going a lot more to now moving forward personally. We talked about disclosing on a flip that the card is trimmed, or we also talked about how can a grading company actually detect a trimmed card. It seems evident that human grading companies at least just can't do it consistently. I think that's the fact of the matter right now. You mentioned the amount of graders increasing, the training. It's just really hard to do it. It takes time. And I'm sure that both, that all the four human grading companies that I look at, being PSA, Beckett, SGC, CSG, I have to think that they're not just
well,
training somebody for 16 hours and then throwing them on the floor. Like, this must be a couple months long of a process. You'd know better with ISA grading, though, maybe.
Well, you know the main guys at CGS
CSG came from Beckett,
are Beckett's guys. Just so you know that it's like.
I have a lot of respect for that move by CSG to bring in Andy Broom and it's just slipping my mind right now. But yes, say it.
No, I'm not. I'm positive. I'm a hobby positive guy. I mean,
okay. Well, here's where I was going with that, though. As a what do you think of this? And this is a question out to the chat. I don't know if this is a good idea or not. It really came up with it. I wrote the note down about 10 minutes ago. But, instead of, like, would it make sense for there to be some sort of report or something from the grading company that says, on a scale of 1 to 10, we think the likelihood this is trimmed is a 0, a 1, all the way up to, 9 or 10 if they're absolutely certain, And I haven't thought this through, so it could be the worst idea in the world. It probably is, just so you know what I'm thinking about my own idea here. But what is that? Is that a potential solution for the grading companies who really just can't detect trimmed cards 100% of the time to actually put their probability assessment, maybe even throw a standard deviation in there that the card might be trimmed?
It would be really interesting. It's like, all other businesses we're the only collectible that does it is like, against, altering like comics and coin. Like every other industry alters the current, the product. We're the only industry where it's like, this is, really bad. So maybe that's like a buffer to acceptance of, I don't know exactly how to do it. We're 70%. The only problem with that is, what if, here comes back to the human element. We're 100% sure this card's not altered. And then all of a sudden, someone releases a video saying, hey, look, here's me altering this card that they just said was 100% not altered. So it's like, you're back to you're the same spot that you're in right now. It's like, because PSA is all opinion based anyway. And PSA is very good at what they do. SGC is very good at what they do. We're really good at what they do. I'm sure the AI, I haven't really bought, tag grade. I'm very curious to see, how it is against some alterations and whatnot. But, we're very good at detecting this stuff. Nobody's perfect. We're definitely way better than, just buying raw cards. But I think people do get confused that they just think like every single thing that's just coming in is getting holdered. Like, that's not the case at all. Like, because PSA over exaggerates. Like, they kick a lot of natural stuff. Like, I've cracked a ton of wax. And we can talk about some of that too. Like, I've cracked hundreds of 86 Fleer boxes. They'll kick Jordan straight from packs and call them altered stock or whatever, just because it's a valuable card and they're being more cautious. So it's just as frustrating when to kick a card that's natural for trimming that is to me the other way around. So I don't know. It's an interesting idea. I think you're kind of back in the same spot when it's like, what if they. So then is there are now price points on, we're 60% sure, we're 80% sure.
Yeah, I know. That's why I throw it out there, but I didn't think it through. I don't know. Let's go to some more comments though. Thanks for those. Dan the Card Man says it's crazy how pop control pops up in the comic space. People say CGC does the opposite, hands out 9.8s, way more than they used to. But that's typical with grading companies over the last 20, 25 years. They go through cycles of being hard graders, easy graders, hard graders, easy graders. I think anyone who's been grading cards for that long, I didn't grade my first card till 2008. I bought graded cards before that, but I did my first sub in 08, Jason. And since then, I've noticed that happening. And you could even kind of know with certain numbers, what certain number ranges were they grading easier versus harder. I'm sure there's people that specialize in that.
This just reminded me of something I kind of wanted to ask because I'm just curious the way you spitball in the last one. So CGC with the comics, like the reason there's higher grades is they'll actually work on and fix and alter the comics for you and then grade them. Like, would it be accepted if, we'll say PSA, since they're the biggest, they hired a card altering division and put something through, maybe not trimming, but like, what if you could send something to PSA first that had creases and they took the creases out for you to get a higher grade. Like, what would that change? You know, how that's just, I'm just spitballing of like, what would that be?
That would be really interesting because it would, let's see how successful they are, know how much people are willing to accept, you know, disclosed altered cards into their collections.
No, it wouldn't be even disclosed. It would just be, you sent them a card that's a surface wrinkle that's a 5, has the eye appeal of an 8. They've taken the surface wrinkle out, and then it goes to grading. So it was professionally restored after, and now the card is just an 8. Interesting.
Yeah, I don't know. You know what's funny? When a kid wrote the player's name or number on the back of the card in the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, they altered the card, but it was okay because it was innocent. They were just a kid putting their initials on the back of the card. That's alteration in the first 8. If I'm holding a card in 1980 and I throw it against a wall and I ding a corner, I've now altered that card. I've changed the condition of that card. That's completely okay by the hobby standards. But to then go and remove that crease or that bend, that's where people get, they don't accept it. Writing on the back of the card in pencil or pen. If someone then goes to try to remove that, it's considered altered. But the alteration actually happened in the first instance, but it was more innocent. So, you know, a lot of it, there's intention in all this.
But you're also, so in the pencil situation, you're bringing, because you can, if pen you can't, but pencil, if it hasn't really indented the card, you can remove pencil from a card and bring it back to its original state with zero evidence of. So like, that's another question. Like, I know a lot of people that are totally okay with that. I know people that, you know, think that you're the devil if you do that. But like, that's another thing that is an area where on the spectrum of 1 to 10, like, where does that fall? Because like you said, the card was, you know, altered. It was then unaltered and brought back to its original state. And then it passes through any major, you know, that's something kind of like the patch thing. Like, it's undetectable. It's going to get graded if it's done properly. Right. But you could ruin the card too, though. And then you're going to be, you know, if you try to do that in an expensive card and it's not done correctly, you're going to take a valuable card and now it's going to be altered and like you're going to lose money. So, you know, that's something to me that's definitely, I think it's okay. You know, so I'm curious your thoughts.
You know what, I got to be honest with you right now, Jason. I was kind of scanning comments, so I was letting you run off there. Let's but I think the comments address some of these things, and I agree with a lot of them. So first of all, Lancer SS says, so doing damage is okay, but fixing a problem is bad. I think that is a lot of that does apply in many situations, but I don't think it's across the board. Dan the Cardman says pressing comics was sacrilegious. Now they charge you for it. That's what you were just saying. I can see it happen. Listen, you know, Jason, everybody, things change over time. Like, everything changes over time. Nothing is permanent. So I could see this sort of comic book thing coming into the sports card space. It's going to take a long time, and you're going to have to get through a lot of us gatekeepers who, you know, I only want pack pulled cards as they were pack pulled in my collection. That's all I welcome into my personal. I have hand cut cards because they were box bottoms or they weren't available otherwise. That's different. A card that is packed, that can be pack pulled, is the only way that I want it in my collection. So
Jeremy, how old are you?
I'm 51.
Okay, so on the spectrum, I think you're clearly over here. Like, you're a purist. I'm somewhere in the middle. Like, I agree on some stuff, and then some stuff I definitely think is altered.
I just have to qualify because I did say earlier I would take a trimmed 52 tops Mantle in my collection that looked really nice as long as it said altered on the label.
No, I understand that, but I mean, I think it's and I don't want to speak for you, but it sounds like removing a crease or some of these other things. Like, maybe you're at least in the middle on it. You're not like just dead set. Like, trimming's bad, like, clearly, but like these other things, it sounds like you're against these too. I think let
me just say one thing, Jason. I've had cards in my showcase at card shows, and then I've had some vintage experts come up to me and say, you know, this is a little harshly graded. My Gordie Howe, PSA 4, 51 Parkers. I've had someone say to me, that's a little harshly graded. You want to leave it. If you leave it with me for a couple weeks, I can probably get it into a 5 condition for. I said, not a chance, man. I'm
Yeah.
happy with it. I don't care about the slab so much. I try to, now it's not, I'm not 100% consistent. I like to buy the card, not the holder. Set registry people buy the holder. They don't care as much about I know we got some guys in there that do, but I've talked to one of the top set registry guys out there, one of the top guys. And he said to me, I don't care about the card. I just want that grade. And this guy could afford whatever he wants. So I found that to be surprising.
I think there's a lot of people like that. I mean, the point I was going with the age thing wasn't to, say how old we're getting, because we're dinosaurs in the hobby now. Is I think that the younger generations are accepting more and more. Definitely the older collectors, for the most part, I feel like are dead set in their ways. And just looking at some of the comments when Evan's video, and like, it just seemed like it was way different than what I thought it would be. It was on, Instagram, it looked like it was split. And then on TikTok, it looks like it was like 90% people are like, I don't understand what the issue is here. So I just feel like we're in the next couple of years heading to the first stage of one of the big companies offering, not trimming, but SGC did sheet cutting. Like they grade sheet cut cards. I don't know if they do it anymore, but they had a service where they would cut down sheet cutting cards. I don't know. Eventually, if PSA makes a move that they, bring in a division like Dan. I don't know what Dan's name is, but Dan was saying it was very taboo in comics, and now the company's like, hey, it's an upcharge. You know how much PSA loves their upcharges. They, how much would they love to hit you for another, couple $100 to take the crease out.
Yeah, nobody minds upcharges in an upticking market, but a downticking market, upcharges can cause some major grief for submitters. That is for sure. Stukes baseball cards here says, I'd like to see the grading companies tell submitters that if their card is found to be trimmed, it will be marked permanently as trimmed on the card, make the risk higher. I love that idea. That could curb it greatly. Here's the major backfire. This is why people have been pissed at PSA in the past, and the argument is, when I'm telling you, they kick a lot of natural stuff for trimming. So let's say I crack an 86 Fleer box, and I spent at the time when I was cracking them, I was spending $15,000. I was not paying this $100,000 price. So I send in my Jordan that's clearly from a pack. PSA gets it, and they think, oh, this card's trimmed. They stamp my card trimmed. That's 100% not trimmed. Like, let's say I get that on video, from start to finish, and now PSA has, owes me $15,000. So, like, they don't shoot anywhere near 100%. So they start stamping people's cards that aren't trimmed. It becomes a major issue. So yeah. There's no shortage of stories that I've seen, heard, and people close to me that have submitted cards that are clearly, you just know, aren't trimmed because they pulled it as a kid, and then they come back trimmed. Okay. Evan Mathis here says, well, like you said, grading companies often call pack fresh cards trimmed. They've always been just guessing, guys. Okay. All right. Colin Murray here says the values of nice graded 4s, 5s, and 6s with soft corners should go up then if high grade vintage is going to scare buyers. And like we talked about a bit earlier, I don't know that that's going to happen across the board and how impactful it'll be, but I do think there is something there. Dan the Cardman again comes back to disclosure for me, and for me as well. But disclosure is only good as long as you're the only person that owns the card. It loses once you move it because that person could break it out. Go ahead, Jason.
Sorry, just to jump back at the last guy's comment. So obviously this business, there's pure collectors and there's people looking for arbitrages to make money. Like, if that person truly feels that way or you feel that way, like that's a massive opportunity right now. Like, if you think 4s, 5s, and 6s are going to go, like, maybe those are really cheap right now in comparison. If higher grade stuff's going to come down, which I don't really think it is, but it's all opinion. If you think 4s, 5s, and 6s are going to be worth more, now's a great time to buy them and make money. So
I had a question that came in. This came in from the group I'm in. The question came in as such. You are on record of having graded over 100 of the 300 MJ Fleer PSA 10s, number 57 from 1986. Can you please confirm that? And if so, how can you possibly have done that without trimming?
So most people don't realize that Michael Jordan is one of the easiest cards in the set. Like, I don't know if you knew that, but like Jordan, like, so I've cracked 300 or 486 flair box. And I don't know if it's 100. Like, I was, if there's 315 in the pot, like maybe I have 75, but I have the most for sure. Like, I have, a high percentage of, whether it's 75, 80, it's definitely a lot of them. I've cracked a ton of wax. I've cracked a ton of 9s. That card wasn't always what it's worth now. Like, there was a point when a Jordan 10 was, $5,000-$6,000. It wasn't scrutinized. Like, you could look at an old Jordan and say, this card, is a 9 today, would never grade. It is what it is. But Jordan's come out like extremely clean. If you crack 86 flair basketball, when I was cracking my boxes from 99 to 04 is when I did the majority of it. I was paying between 12 and 15,000 a box. People were selling they thought I was like a rich trust fund kid, and I had this addiction to opening packs, and almost felt sorry, like, oh, this guy's got an opening pack problem. What they didn't realize is, on a bad box, I would lose $4,000 or $5,000. On a good box that came centered, I would make 150 to 200,000. So, yeah, I mean, it's just Jordan's like literally easiest card in the set. It's graded harder because it's Jordan, but he's in the list of the 10 guys that if they're centered, they rarely come with print. They usually come centered. And 86 flair boxes are always like the corners are always 10s. If the corners are not 10s, you have a resealed box.
Okay, cool. Evan Mathis says, I graded 6 of the 86 flair 10s. None were altered, at least to his knowledge. And the Hobby with Cage says, notice that no one is trimming hockey cards because no one really cares about hockey cards. Cage, you put out some great content, buddy, but I thought you were informed. I thought you actually knew what you were talking about. You obviously haven't been to the Sport Card Expo ever. A room is the second biggest show in the world is 80% hockey. But I know you're just giving me a hard time there, Cage. Okay. Back to you, Jason. So here's another comment, another question I got, and we've sort of talked about it a bit, but let's just go through this one. There's been a lot of discussion around trim cards passing through grading. Is this an issue with some graders not having proper training, or perhaps not spending enough time with each card to examine it thoroughly? Or is it possible that many of these cards have been trimmed in such a way that it simply cannot be detected by even the most experienced of graders?
I think a little bit of all the above. All the above. I mean, I think it's a combination of all that. A lot of people will send stuff in at low. What's that, Kate? A lot of people send in stuff at a tier level that maybe they shouldn't, and it kind of slips through one of the newer guys.
Look, this is a good comment right here. That's a good comment, Dan.
I don't know Dan, but I already like him. I don't know if he likes me. I don't really, but I like Dan. Dan seems fun.
Yeah, that's a good comment. And Cage's new his new avatar is actually cards in a cage, so he's halfway there. Okay, sorry. Please get back to.
I love Cage. Is great too. I get along with Cage. I get along with everybody. That was one of the things too. Is like me and Evan were laughing because Evan posted this video. Like, and I truly think Evan posted this video because he wants to draw attention to his website. But regardless, like literally, Evan and I have someone sees a picture of us, and all of a sudden, like all these crazy rumors. Like, I've been in the hobby for 30 years. Like, I literally know everybody in the hobby. So it's like I'm one step away from it. So like, it doesn't mean like one person does one thing and all of a sudden, I don't know. It's just silly. Rumors. Like, I'm an open book. I've always been transparent. It's like I wish people would like ask me a question rather than say something silly. Now, wait, what did
Chico was just saying that Cage must have fooled me knowing about when I said I thought he was informed. Okay, but let's keep going. Having fun with some fellow content creators. I know both these guys hung out several times. Good guys. Okay, Bobby Burrell, and this is what I was talking about earlier. This was in the back of my head when I made the comment before, and I just couldn't place the case. But this is one of them. He said Bobby Burrell opened a pack of 54-55 Topps hockey at the Toronto Expo on video. If you don't know Bobby Burrell, he's hobby hockey historian, tons of integrity, everything there. He said 2 cards came back altered from the grading company. Enough said, when they clearly weren't
I
altered.
mean,
So
it happens. I mean, it happens a lot. Like when I needed to hit my volume, I was opening a lot of vending. I was opening a lot of like upper deck. I opened 8,000 cases of '01 upper deck golf. I opened tens of thousands of boxes of Kobe Bryant stuff. Like and I was opening a lot of vending from the '70s and '80s. I think your viewers would think this is interesting, just with where card grading prices were going or are at in the early 2000s. What do you think my grading fee was? Like, what do you think I paid to grade a card?
in 2008, I did a submission to PSA of like I don't know, a couple hundred cards. I think I got $8 a card back then in '08.
Yeah, so I was my cheapest rate in the early 2000s was $2.80 a card.
What?
Yeah. So like it opened it up to grade a lot of, and I think PSA did that because they wanted the cheaper stuff for people to build set registries. So like a lot of like they opened that up for probably 15 to 20 people, and the goal was to just get product out there. 75 tops and 7s and 8s that you couldn't grade at $8 to $10, but you could grade it $2.50, $3. So just get quantity of shit out there. But with that being said, opening a lot of vending. There would be times when you'd literally get a run of 100 cards in a row that come back trimmed or minimum size, and it's like no, like here's the box. So it happens way more than people think.
So Cage says Parkhurst were a trimmer's dream, meaning he does know about hockey. Colin Murray said Gary Moser loves hockey cards, 52 and 53 Parkhurst, especially 51 Parkhurst come in all different shapes, it seems, I shouldn't say shapes, different sizes. And, I'm of the understanding that that's just the way they were made. It wasn't consistent. Who cared back then in 1951? You were selling gum. But, maybe many of them have been trimmed. I just don't know at all. So,
yeah.
Okay.
Different. Well, one of my things I said earlier too is like oversized cards. That was a trimmer's dream. A lot of that stuff has all been used in like, you can't just go trim a regular Parkhurst because it's going to be undersized. Every grading company's not every grading company. Most grading companies are going to catch stuff that's undersized. So like that oversized stuff, like it's just, you don't see it anymore. Like that's why a lot of these guys that did that, like they're, they've moved on and they're not doing it. Like, so I feel like a lot of people have moved to newer cards because, the print quality on newer stuff is all over the board too with sizing.
We talked a bit earlier about, rubbing out creases or other ways that cards can be, improved. I had a question that came in. The question reads, do you believe trimming a card is restoration or alteration?
It's you're altering the card. Yeah.
And, we've kind of talked about different things here, but, and you and I in speaking the other day, where is the line? Where, like, is it blurry? Is there a line between, when does preservation turn into alteration? Or is it a distinct line? Is there any gray area, or is it really easy to determine? And even as I'm asking the question, I'm thinking, well, we've seen the diversity of thoughts in the chat tonight. It's going to be different for a lot of people, but what are your thoughts?
Well, the reason we're in the situation we're in, and the reason we have people out there that, I don't think it's a ton of people, but there's people that are like, hey, I hate this guy or he's a scam, like, is because everybody has a different opinion on where that line is. And, your opinion and my opinion are different, but like, I'm not as, far blown, like, Evan's opinion versus some of these new guys I see, they're like, dude, I would love to know how to do it. Like I trim all this I see people are like, I would trim all this stuff if I knew how, but then I know people that are like, a card comes out of a pack, I don't want you to breathe on it. And so like, yeah, it just brings us back to like, who draws the line, because everybody has a different line that they draw. To me, like I said, I think a lot of stuff is okay. And I think there's some stuff that's not okay. There's some people that think nothing's okay. There's some people that think everything's okay. It's like, you kind of got to figure out where you're at. Evan says, all graded cards are trim. Like, I don't know if that's the case, but like, there's definitely trim cards in graded holders. Like there's no question. Like
Yeah.
that's the reality. Like, you just need to figure out, does it affect you a little bit? Does it affect you a lot? And like, every collector needs to make their own decision on where they want to be with the information out there.
Okay. Couple comments we're going to get to right here. Mike Petty first wants to know, do you know Scissorhands?
Who's Scissorhands?
Moser.
I've never met Moser. No.
Okay.
Like I've seen that picture of it, like the same picture,
Yeah.
but I've never met Gary. No.
Vintage Card Collector says removing a wax stain equals restoration. I can see that. The card came out of the pack with wax on it, so I can understand that.
But I know people that are like pitchfork on that. They like want to just, you know, murder you for removing a wax stain. Like, I'm okay with it, but it needs to be done the right way too, where it's not going to affect the card, you know, a year, like they use some chemical and then a year from now something happens to the card. Like there's a correct way to do it. And maybe Evan will be kind enough to do a follow-up video on some of the, you know, but you know,
well, here we have a comment from him right here. He says, I think the reason it's not so gray to me is because of the history of the hobby since PSA came on the scene. If grading companies' largest submitters weren't always trimmers, it'd be different. Now, I mean, that's a pretty serious accusation he's making there. To what degree do you think he's right?
I think there's a lot of cards and holders that are trimmed. I don't know if we agree on the amount, but like I said, it's clear that there's altered cards in slabs.
For sure. Bobby Burrell tries to define what, you know, alteration versus preservation. He says alteration is when you add or take away from a card, add color, add paper, take away a stain, maybe take away paper. He says restoration is repairing faults on a card is his opinion. And well, that's interesting. And I respect Bobby's opinion always. So yeah, there's one opinion from someone who's been doing this thing, you know, for 40 plus years. Professor says the scientific measure could be if you are removing non-covalent bonded stuff, that is okay, but covalent bonded stuff may not be okay. You must be a professor using chemistry terms and all that right now. So thank you for that. Okay. Another question that came in was, what percent of trimmed cards do you think are in PSA holders versus SGC? It seems like most of the recent discussion has centered around PSA.
SGC has altered cards in their holders. But with that being said, SGC is like extremely knowledgeable. I would say the most knowledgeable, and stuff even has slipped through them. Like it's just part of it's going to happen. Like you need to accept that stuff's going to get through. And these are some of the most knowledgeable graders, but I feel very comfortable, you know, buying an SGC card, even if I had an SGC. So if I had an SGC card and it was, you know, it was trimmed, but it was an SGC, I would feel pretty good about owning that card, because I would assume like if that thing was good enough to fool Scott or, you know, one of the other head graders SGC, then to me, it's like, I'm okay with it. Like
and that's where, you know, I talked about this recently, and there was a short clip that was out of me talking about this, and I said, does it even matter? And what I meant by does it even matter is once the card is in the PSA holder, does the hobby care anymore? Some people do, no doubt about it. So I'm included in those people that do care. But a lot of people, a lot of the PSA set registry, collectors, competitors, I'll even call them, because they're competing together at the top of that ladder. They don't, I don't think they care. That's why I made that comment. Does it even matter? And I still wonder, once it's in the slab, it's like an invisibility cloak. It covers, it covers disguises the inauthentic nature of the card, or the altered nature of the card, because it's in the slab. So
I think the overwhelming majority is it doesn't matter, but they're still going to collect. Like for me, I collect centering. So like I've said this earlier, like if I get a card and it was like literally like early 90s and it was just a total hack job, yeah, I don't want it. But if it comes in, it looks like it's full size, it looks good, has the right cut, and it's centered, I would, and like if I bought that card and then later someone came up to me and was like, hey, that card's like, it wouldn't bother me that like it's in a slab, it's full size, like I enjoy that card. But I don't want one that's like, you know, a total hack job. But so that's where I'm a big eye appeal guy. Like I will overpay like crazy for a card that is dead centered and looks like it's, you know, maybe closer to the next grade. Sometimes I've paid double or triple. You know, well, when I was cracking stuff, I would pay whatever when I thought a card could crack and be the next grade because the multiplier was so great. But now I'm more of a collector, and like I'm putting stuff away. Like I would rather pay a 20, 30, 40% premium, and I'm actually getting picky now where I won't even buy a card if it's, if it's an 8 and it's centered 70-30, I'll just pass on it.
Yeah, well, same here. Same
Yeah.
here with that. Collectors Canada said, if a card is trimmed so well, it's impossible to tell it's even trimmed. Nobody knows. And again, that's kind of my, like, does it even matter if you don't know? But it does matter because the card is not authentic anymore, but it matters because it's not authentic.
Well, it's authentic.
No one's ever going to know.
It's authentic. It is authentic. It's trimmed.
Sorry, I
think that's a big difference.
That is a big. I just spoke wrong. Yeah, definitely agree with you, and thank you for calling that out because the card is authentic.
Yeah,
a trimmed authentic card is still an authentic card. It's just now altered, and altered is the word I meant to use.
Because PSA actually made a mistake and graded a reprint. Like they would definitely buy that back, but like that there's no gray area there. Like a reprint is like that's not good. That's
Mookie Chilson says, Jason, what does ISA consider to be the line when it comes to this discussion? What do your graders learn on this subject?
We pretty much grade on the PSA standard. I mean, a lot of the vintage that we get a lot of mid-grade vintage. Like the high-grade vintage we get is usually pretty blatantly trimmed. If it's, we've gotten some decent high-grade, but the majority of it is people testing us out. They don't test us out, as much anymore. It's kind of funny because people will set up invoices, thinking we're this new company, not knowing who, like me and like a couple of the guys that I've trained. And my main guy has been with me for 15 years and sat next to me. So he kind of laughs at some of this stuff, but you'll get an order in of 3 cheap original cards and then like a blatantly trimmed, 10,000, high dollar. That would be a big card that as it's being opened, I could walk by and say, hey, that card's trimmed or that Jordan's fake. And so we don't get tested as much as we did early on. But we grade on a similar scale of PSA. And yeah, if something appears to be trimmed, like we're going to kick it.
Okay. Yankees fan says, great information tonight, but it is disturbing. Mike Petty says, great show tonight. Hey, we might start off a little rocky, Mike, but glad you stuck it out. Bobby Burrell says, removing wax or gum from a card should be okay. The card were produced without those, just a packaging shortcoming. Yeah, I think I can get behind that one. Lancer says, good comment. What about all the fake holders that are out there and PSA hasn't addressed it so the community can identify them? Yeah, let's talk about fake slabs for a moment because I think that's certainly a bit of an issue. What do you know about the proliferation of fake slabs over the last 2 years?
I know a lot. I know there's some stuff I can't discuss, but I do know that PSA, they're pretty aggressive at going after people. There's a main guy, and they've pretty aggressively going after him. He has a few guys in the United States distributing this stuff. Luckily, they took one of these guys down about 2 months ago, which is good. But PSA, if you've noticed in the last several years, they've changed their holder, they've changed their label several times to combat this. There's another company located somewhere else that has had some fake holders for several years and has never addressed this. So there's a lot more fake holders out of that company. So that one I'd be more cautious with.
Well, look at this. Mathis just jumped in. He says fake slabs are way more concerning than trimmed cards. He goes on to say the main guys in Mexico and unstoppable.
Yep. That's it. By far more of a bigger problem than trim cards. As much as you hate trimming cards, it's like the fake holders is blatantly, there's no we can all agree that that's 100%. Like there's no gray area there. Like the fake cards not fake cards, fake holders, putting in fake or real cards, but very ugly. PSA is doing their best to combat this, but it's an issue. I think now that they're, in my opinion, now that they're a private company, they should probably send somebody to Mexico to confront this person. When they were a public company, I made this suggestion, and you couldn't do that as a public company. But now, as a private company, Nat, maybe someone should send this person to go see, visit. Evan, we know what city this guy's in. We know where he's at, so we can give you the coordinates.
Let's get the sports card radio guys to go down there and confront him.
And go murder them.
I'd love to see their content after that. That would be
So I do mean this with. I hope these guys do not attack them. Like, this guy's connected with the cartel. I do not want these guys to start attacking this person. Like they can say, they can talk to me. Like, I have a family. I'm not, in my 20s, I might have I could care less. They're bringing viewers over to me. They crack me, whatever. Like, I really hope that these guys don't start talking a lot about this and making videos and getting all arrogant, because they could push the wrong person the wrong way, and just letting us know that this guy is involved with the cartel. So, with that being said, they're probably going to be like, I don't care, and just, be careful. Be careful.
So it's mind-boggling that there are fake slabs out there, whether it's any, a PSA, Beckett, SGC, CSG. I've heard about fake PSA slabs, and I think I've heard about fake Beckett slabs, but I don't think I've heard about anything else. Is that where it's most prevalent? And we talk about, you've mentioned it, Evan Mathis has mentioned it. It seems like you guys are have the same knowledge about somebody who's doing this, but like, how hard is it to do it? How hard is it to create a fake PSA or Beckett slab or any slab? And is this something like when I said earlier, I'm certain I have a trimmed card in a trimmed graded card in my collection. I have too many slabs not to. Do you think, should I be saying the same thing about I probably have a fake PSA or Beckett slab in my collection too?
So two parts to that. So what were the companies that you mentioned? Because I don't want to say the companies.
Well, I mean, when I think about, I have 5 grading companies that I consider. The 4 human grading companies: PSA, Beckett, SGC, CSG. I think they're the big 4. Yep. We got PSA and then the second big 3. And then as far as automated grading, you've got Tag Grading, the company that I'm involved with. So, yep. Those are the companies that I mentioned.
So I've not seen any fake SGCs. Fake Beckett, yes. I've not seen any CGS or CSG, however you say it, whatever. They're too new. I haven't seen any of that. And PSA, it's the question. Your question was, how good can they be? And the answer is if you're funded by the drug cartel and you have unlimited money, you can probably do something pretty good. But there's also other idiots that it's less now because the holders curl over. But before, you could crack a card out in 2 seconds and just glue it back together. And, but it's surprising how, when you look at PSA slabs, the majority of PSA slabs now, are all the newer ones. Somehow the old slabs, you just go to a show and it's all new slabs. So those are much harder to crack out and do the whole, pop them open and glue them together. So I don't think you have to worry about, if you see that, you can generally tell, it's basically one guy that you have to worry about. And if you're worried about that in your collection, I don't think you have to be. I think, be smart. Buy stuff through major auction houses. Buy stuff through big dealers that have probably had PSA look at some of this stuff secondary. Don't go on Craigslist and buy a 52 Mantle 8 for $100,000 cash, because there's some pretty obvious things that happen that you look at somebody, what were you thinking? No, you did not just go buy a Jordan rookie and a 10 for $30,000 cash on Craigslist. So as long as you're careful at where you're buying, I think there are plans in place to intercept that. It's targeting very new people and people that are ignoring. A lot of people like to ignore a great deal when something's too good to be true. They're just so excited, to get a deal that they overlook the fact that it's too good a deal.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that makes sense. Buyer beware type of thing there. Lancer says it's easier than fixing cards. GC says, Jeremy, I find it a little disingenuous that two guys associated with working for grading companies are taking shots at PSA for slabbing trimmed cards. You can call it taking shots, or you can call it just speaking facts. I've been in this hobby for over 40 years, even longer than this guy right here, who's done a lot more in the hobby than I have. And I have an extensive collection of PSA graded cards and Beckett graded cards. And I think it would be more disingenuous, GC, if I ignored this the whole way. And if you notice, I haven't talked about tag at all until just now. And I have ignored the questions where I've been asked to ask Jason about AI, because tag is AI automated grading. So we haven't even talked about it. I wear the shirt, of course. It's my brand. I love it. But
I don't think I'm taking shots.
Hold on, Jason. I just want to finish that. I'm sorry you feel that way, GC, and you're entitled to feel the way you feel. But I don't feel that way in my head. I'm being completely authentic in what I'm saying. And let's face it. I'll be honest. You know, I've had my issues with PSA. I've had my issues with BGS. But I know people at both companies, good people. I think the human grading companies do the best they can with their human limitation. Simple as that. And thankful. We should all be grateful. Well, maybe not, but I'll say this anyway. We should be grateful to the grading companies for helping elevate the hobby to where it is today. And that is not tag. That is PSA, SGC, and Beckett for the most part. So those are my thoughts on that. Go ahead, Jason.
I was gonna say I don't think I'm taking a shot at PSA at all. I mean, like 90% of my collection is PSA. I have lots of money in PSA cards. I think I was actually complimenting them on, you know, they're very successful at catching a lot of stuff, and stuff is gonna slip through anywhere. Like it is what it is. Like I don't think it's like just a massive flood of ugly cards getting in. I think they're getting, you know, they get hit with a lot of stuff. They've been hit with a lot of stuff in the years. They've gotten better over the years, which is all you ask. Like, you know, be better than you were in the 90s and be better. And they have gotten way better than they did in the 90s. Like they were just figuring this thing out in the 90s. So I'm not taking shots at PSA at all. I like PSA. You know, I have a ton of PSA, and everyone's entitled to their opinion. I don't think I was taking shots at PSA.
For sure. And Dan the Cardman says I think he's saying our credit, mine and Jason's. It's not like we haven't disclosed our vested interest. Pretty front and center. Yeah, no doubt about it. Thank you, Dan. Evan says it's not disingenuous. Tag and ISA exist because PSA has holes. And listen, I'm not saying PSA has holes, but I'm saying that other great, like it's a competitive market. You know, when a company like Tag can come along and differentiate itself by taking the human bias out of it, that's just another option for collectors to go for, to look at. That kind of thing. So
it's a growing market as well. I mean, like there's room for more. I mean, our hobby is, you know, maybe 10x in the last couple of years. You know, and hopefully it's going to 100x in the next, you know, with Fanatics bringing in people. But like, there's just room for more. Like, it doesn't need to be, you know, all or nothing. Like, there can be a few. You know, I think it would be horrible if it was a monopoly, because then, you know. So I think it's good to have a few options.
Thank you. Professor says, please talk about tag and the benefit of having a 100-point grading scale. It's actually a 1,000-point grading scale, and I think the benefit is you get a more precise grade, you know. And sorry, Jason, but I'll just take a second here and say that the standard grade, the human grading companies grade on it's like a 19-point scale with the half grades. That there's an infinite amount of conditions a card can be in. So even a 1,000-point grading scale doesn't cover all the conditions. Some might say it's too specific. That's fine. That's a fair position to take. But I love it because I like the precision of the grade personally. And I could go on and on about tag, but taggrading.com, everybody, check it out. You know, it's machine learned grading, 10 years in the making. It took 10 years to develop the technology. And Jason, because it's been asked, what, you know, and Jason and I had this conversation a few days ago. What do you think about tag grading? And if you don't mind, Jason, I'm just going to kind of get through the discussion we had. You said, well, the one thing I don't think a computer can do is identify or opine on eye appeal. And I explained to Jason how tag actually has a system to handle eye appeal. And I'm not going to get into it all right now. We can do it another time, but I'll leave it at that. There's no human bias. There's nobody having a good day or a bad day. And the other thing about tag grading for you, Jason, and everybody else, is that tag isn't looking to recreate the grading standards, rather apply automation, consistency, transparency, reproducibility to the grading services. Okay. Anything you want to add or subtract? Or
No, I just want people to know, like, I'm rooting for tech. Like, I root for PSA. Like, I'm not like, there's a lot of people out here that, like, it's just like they're just negative energy and they want people to like. I want tag to, like, I own a grading company. I want tag to succeed as well. Like, there's plenty of opportunity for everybody. So, like, I don't want it to think like, I'm excited to see you guys grow and do your thing. And, like, send me a couple of cheap cards. I want to see the holders, and I've yet to see the holders in person.
You'll love it. You'll love it.
Well, I'll send you some ISA card. We'll do a swap.
We'll do a swap. The one other thing about tag very quickly is that we don't have a paper label. The label is actually printed right on the inside of the plastic, rendering counterfeiting, I would say, almost completely impossible because, and there's other security features as well, but there's no paper label. So that, I think that's a big benefit of what we have going on at tag grading right now. That's what, and I didn't create tag. I joined tag after going to the facility before I had them on my show to vet them for myself and being absolutely blown away that this is exactly what the hobby needs, the disruptor the hobby needs. I'm like, man, if I, this is amazing. And an opportunity came up and here I am. Okay. Triple V says it's always difficult to scale, especially during the pandemic. PSA hired a ton of people and I'm not sure if they have enough experience or extensive training for things to work effectively. Fair comment, but I will say that in talking to people at grading companies during the pandemic, they said that, we don't just hire someone and throw them out there. I made the comment earlier. Are they training them for 8 or 16 hours, or are they training them for months or at least weeks? I don't know. I've heard from talking to these people, like when Nat Turner was on my show a couple of years ago, I believe he said they don't get on the grading floor by themselves right away. It's intensive training. And they also said that not everybody makes it. So they might hire somebody, but they may not make it through training. So I still buy PSA and Beckett graded slabs and the odd other company. I still buy their slabs because I buy the card. If that's where the card is, I want the card, I'm going to buy it. So in any event, sorry, Jason, your turn to jump in.
The only thing I can add is, I don't know the most recent, but I know a few years ago or 5 or 6 years ago, talking with some of the higher ups, basically they would say for every 10 people they brought in to, like, get through the first, like, 2 or 3 weeks, of those 10 people, 9 of them went away. So, like, one of those 10 people made it to the next. They're definitely not just throwing somebody, you don't just do a 4-hour test. Like, but even with that said, like, it's a really hard thing, like I've been grading for, several hours a day for 25, like, it's like you pick up, like, it's not an easy thing to teach. So, and I've said that it's hard.
No doubt. Here's another question about just the whole trimming thing, which is, does the hobby even want to know the truth? Like, again, to that comment I made before, does it even matter once it's in that slab? Does the hobby care? I've got, like I said, I'm sure I've got trimmed cards in my collection. Do I want to know the truth? I mean, part of me does, because I love my cards. They're my babies. I love my cards. I want to know if they're, it's almost like you bring home the wrong baby from the hospital.
So Jeremy,
later, do you want to know that wasn't your own baby? I don't know. Like, do I want to know I have trimmed cards? I probably do. I'd probably like to know, but at the same time, if I know, now I've got a moral dilemma. What do I do with it and all this? So I'd rather not know.
I was going to ask you. So let's just say we're going through your collection and you have a card that's, $5,000, and I'm hanging at your house and you're like, Jason, give me your opinion on this. And I look at it and I'm like, Jeremy, I'm pretty sure this card's trimmed. And you're like, well, I don't want this card in my collection anymore. Do you go on the market and say, or do you just send it to an auction house, or do you go on the market and say, hey guys, I have this, whatever, 1956 Mickey Mantle card. It's a 7, but you know what? It's trimmed. And, like, do you sell it that way, or do you just, it's in a 7 holder? Like, what do you do? Like,
that's an issue. That's a big issue. What do you do?
First
of all, I could say, well, it's just you. It's your opinion, Jason. I don't need to know. Like, I don't need to believe what you say. PSA slabbed it. Beckett slabbed it. Whoever slabbed it, I'm going to go with them. I think once it's in that holder and the hobby respects the grading companies so much, or to the degree that they do, that's what people are going to rely on. I'm not going to say, okay, this card is graded a PSA 9, but Jason Koonce told me he thinks it's trimmed. Like, who's Jason Koonce? Some people might, a lot of people.
I've consulted for all three grading companies, by the way. Just so, a lot of people care what my opinion is on big stuff. So just so you know.
But I'm talking the random. What I mean by that, Jason, is the random guy that I'm exhibiting at a card show.
For sure,
but comes and
it comes back to the whole original point is like grading is opinion based. Like, so whether I tell you it is or it isn't, like whether PSA says it is or like they'll slab stuff that is and kick stuff that's not. So like we all come back to like grading is one big opinion unless somebody's sitting in the park, in the room at PSA where you're submitting, like, trimming cards with that paper cut that Evan had, and then like that's the only way they're known, if it's like they're watching the guy on camera. Otherwise, it's an opinion.
Yeah, exactly.
So
yeah. Ricky says, "Relax, Jeremy. It's only cardboard." I couldn't disagree with this more. When I see these "it's only cardboard" comments, yeah, these things are made out of cardboard, but it's so much than just being cardboard. This is, for me, it's a lifestyle. I said, sports cards are a lifestyle for me. It's something that I've been into for over 40 years. I do love my cards. So if you say it's only cardboard, you're probably not really in this thing. You just don't get it, Ricky.
Collectors are passionate.
Yeah, it's nostalgia, it's passion, it's hobby, it's interest, it's history, it's technology. It's so many more things than just cardboard. The it's only cardboard is an easy way to kind of like put a quick comment out there and make yourself look cool or sound cool. But really, it's a major sign of ignorance and just not being in touch with reality.
I have a hard time selling my cardboard when I need real life shit. Like right? It's a struggle to pick out what I. And usually when I sell something, it's only to buy more cardboard, So,
Ricky goes on to say, "Someone out there somewhere is starving for a meal." Well, I hope you're volunteering 40 hours a week, Ricky, because you sure are virtuous, my friend. You sure are virtuous. Okay, Bobby Burrell says, "Jason was right. Training people to grade cards is super difficult as it is training people for wax packs. That is where we need more companies." Professor here says, "Recent story this week where senior PSA grader disagreed with the PSA 9 grade and the slab was cracked, but the card was damaged by PSA. Definitely some risk with that for sure." Lancer here says, "So you agree that a card shouldn't be called out publicly on social media and hurt them?" How do you do that how do you do it with certainty though, Lancer? That's the only thing I would say to that. Any comments there, Jason?
It's tough because I've noticed some stuff that like, you see these before and after pictures and like a lot of stuff looks pretty darn clear. But I also know with some of this newer stuff, you see like it matches up, like they match the serial number. Well, I have news for you. A lot of these companies back in the day backdoored a lot of cards, and with a lot of same serial numbers. So like there's been times when I've been offered sets of, this is 15, 20 years ago, but some of those 90s and 2000 sets, or I've been offered, 10 sets of a card with the same, 10 number 10s, 10 number 11. Like, so that's definitely out there where there's multiple cards with multiple serial numbers. On top of that, you had when Fleer did their auctions, they sold tens of thousands of uncut sheets with no serial numbers, which now people are serial number, which is fraud. But their serial number, some of those got through grading companies. So now there's more duplicate serial numbers of that. So like, like there's, you just don't know 100%. So people do call stuff out, like it is what it is. But nobody truly knows 100%.
Ricky says depreciating assets, and that's just another Ricky's off his game tonight because depreciation comes from wear and tear, disintegration, erosion. That's where depreciation comes from, and depletion and other accountant type terms, Ricky, which you definitely haven't taken any accounting courses. Sports cars don't depreciate anymore because we take care of them right out of the pack nowadays, and if we don't, they're slabbed for the most part, or kept nicely in binders. So if you protect yourself well enough, me and my kids and my grandkids aren't going to. Maybe we don't know, because like looking at Allen and Ginter's, like they still they hold up well, and that's 140 years ago. So like I'm not concerned about if my cards
aren't in perfect condition, 200 years from now, I'll be dead.
Exactly. Evan Mathis, if you're still there, thanks for joining. You're welcome for the bedtime stories. Jordan does say, Evan, did you post the video for attention towards your site? If so, genius, regardless of how please don't cuss on Sports Cards Live. Lancer says social media has become a judge and jury with no experts and has created a huge problem for some honest people. Definitely agree with that. And Dennis Zender in the house.
Let me just backtrack to that really quick, just because this is such a true comment. And I've been pretty transparent over the years. I've been willing to talk with anybody live or at shows. So if you have a question, and I'm answer as many questions as people want, or feel free to message me questions, but to just regurgitate what they see on an Inquirer board is just, it's part of the problem, not part of the solution. So I've been one of the few people that has been openly, I'll talk about anything. So yeah, to be judge and jury is not good,
It's not, but free speech.
Free speech.
So
free speech. So get you clicks.
That's where we are. That's where we are. All right, listen, we're almost at 2.5 hours, Jason. That goes by really fast. The chat's been great tonight for the most part. Thanks everybody for that. Anything else, Jay? Anything else that you'd like to talk about? I wouldn't mind getting your opinion on Fanatics coming into the space and how that's going to change things going forward. If you want. Anything else you'd like to say about ISA grading? Anything else that you'd like to get into here before we wrap this up?
I think Fanatics could be really huge. I'm hoping they understand. I think they do. I don't know if you guys know this, but I was part of the initial process of that with Zero Cool. Josh and I, we kind of started all that. I left. Fanatics, took over with all them, and so I had a big piece in the beginning of helping that along. I think Fanatics is a massive company. I think when we start seeing ads in the Super Bowl, we start seeing ads at TNT. It's just gonna bring in a lot more people. So there's gonna be negative. There's negative in everything. I think the positive is gonna outweigh the negative with Fanatics. I think bringing in more people is just overall a good thing. ISA, yeah, check us out. At ISA grading. I don't want to compete with Tag, but give us a try. A lot of experience behind our grading. Obviously, me or the guys that have been with me are pretty experienced. So yeah, I want to answer. I don't want to focus on ISA. I don't, because I don't want to. It's. I know you're with Tag and stuff. I would just I only have about 10 or 15% left of my battery, anyways. I would if anybody in the chat has any more questions, I would love to answer questions. Why, I'm here. It's hard to get me.
All right, so let's give a couple minutes here. Get some more questions in if you'd like while we're waiting for that. Northern Lights, I'm glad you got your tag order back. I hope you love your cards and our slabs. If all grading companies measured the specs, wouldn't we be better off? Jordan Hudson, I appreciate that, Jordan, and no worries, but no, I just don't. I put it on screen by mistake. I wish I didn't. Diamond Card Collector, glad to have you here. Eric Stefano, thank you for being here. Guys, any questions for Jason? As he says, he wants to make himself available, but he's a busy guy. So we have him here right now for a few more minutes. Put any other questions you have in the chat. Jason, while we're waiting for any that might come, any false narratives in the hobby that have made their way through social media in the last, few years that you can put to bed or just declaim or anything like that? You're like an industry insider. So many people. What do you know that just isn't true that everyone else takes as truth?
I'll be honest. I don't I'm on social media, but I don't spend a lot. When something gets said about me, it's usually from somebody sending me a clip and of this and being hey, what's this? And then I did want to tell so we do have a time. I want to tell one of these stories because it's actually interesting talking about how I'm not going to say their name, but the person who threatened to murder me, why this was a good thing and why I don't really care that people talk about me other than one of the biggest collections I bought happened. You're supposed to remind me to tell you this story, but one of the biggest collections I bought in 2019 was a guy who had sold his business. It was, some computer, cybersecurity company. He had a pretty nice collection. And he said his all buying ads to him were the same. Like, you know, he looked and there was 20 people running buying ads, and they all looked the same. Like, we're paying the most for your cards, blah, blah, blah. So he did some more research because this was, you know, close to a 7-figure collection. And what he told me after we had talked on the phone for an hour was he was looking for somebody who was getting attacked, because he knew in his business he was at the very top, and like he got attacked all the time, knowing that it was a lot of it was BS. So when he saw me getting attacked from the people who threatened to murder me, like he looked at that as a positive. Like he was like, okay, I'm interested to hear this guy's story. So he asked me all about that. We had a great time on the phone. But long story short, like I ended up spending, this guy had a set run of 53 to 69, some stuff in the 70s, all graded like PSA 8s, there's some 9s, like, and this was, you know, this was like an $800,000 deal, which it was great timing to buy that deal right before COVID. But like, that's a deal maybe I wouldn't have got. So like, there truly is like no such thing as bad press, because if those guys hadn't attacked me, maybe this guy wouldn't have reached out to me. And like, I almost feel like I should give those guys a little commission for it. But you know, like I made $2 or $3 million off that deal, which I never would have got if like I wasn't out there. So I love the views, I love the clicks, and like, you know, every now, you know, it's like I do get a ton of positivity. Like they love your content, love it, and then like, you know, every like 20 comments I get, you know, scammer or something. Like it's just like, okay, like I can't please everybody, I'm human. But I just, when somebody says that, I would like them to follow up with an actual, like, you know, what's your source on that? Because, you know, you don't become close with everybody in the business for 30 years going around screwing people over. Like that's just not how you make a name for you. It's just not realistic.
Some people do due diligence. Some people are just lazy and take whatever they hear and go with it. It's just, you know, human nature. We're going to do 3 more questions. The first one from the professor says, is ISA incorporating AI, and how to learn more about if you are?
I'm not as big on AI as Tag is. So, you know, I think AI initially will be good for data entry. Like data is a cluster. As far as grading, I think it can help with centering. You know, I would honestly be more curious to learn Tag's process, and I'm going to research it some more. We don't really have it. That's not, you know, we want to focus in the 50 to 250. Like if you have a really high end card, my suggestion is that it should probably go to PSA, because that's where you get the value. Like I really want to focus on the niche of the $50 to $250, you know, area. I don't really think we need AI for that. Like to me, that's easy stuff to grade and just, you know, quantity get that. So yeah, no, right now we don't have thoughts to put AI into our product. I'll leave that up to Tag.
Leave it to the people that actually develop the AI. Okay.
I'll leave it.
Vintage Card Collector says, what is the most valuable vintage card you know or highly suspect is trimmed other than the Wagner PSA 8?
I mean, I would just be speculating. I mean, one of the Gretzky's looks, you know, the bottom looks a little funny to me. I don't know. I mean, but it's just like me giving my opinion. That card was graded a long time ago. So, you know, I don't know. I mean, I could think about, you message me and I would try to come up with a better answer, but you know, it's just my opinion. But I mean, the Gretzky looked a little funky, but that was graded, you know, 25 years ago.
And then Jeff S says, are both you and Josh Luber out of Zero cool? They seem to be drastically behind as we speak since you and or Josh left. Josh Luber told me in person he's out.
I left about 5 months. So Josh and I and a couple other guys started it. I left about 5 or 6 months in, and the company got restructured. And honestly, the only reason I left is just being transparent. The first time in my life, I felt like I wasn't my own boss. I was on Zoom calls all day long. You know, during COVID, I'm watching my kids play in the background. 10% battery left, so we can go until.
This is the last question.
Yeah. So, you know, I don't do cards for money. I hate saying that, but like I do cards because I love it. I enjoy it. Like I could be sitting on a beach somewhere. I work my ass off with ISA because I enjoy it and I want to help build something and build a company. So like with the whole Zero Cool thing, I found myself not enjoying cards anymore because I wasn't buying and selling and doing all this stuff. I was literally like on Zoom calls and like these real meetings that I've never been part of in my life. I hated it. And especially where I'm like, normally I can restructure my schedule. If I need to get something done, I'm going to work from midnight to 6 a.m. and get that stuff done. And, you know, this was like wake up at 9, and from 9 to 6, I have like a scheduled out Zoom. So I just wasn't really happy, and I left a lot of money on the table. And, I know I think Josh has moved along as well. No.
So we'll see what happens with Zero Cool. Okay. Well, that's it. We're gonna wrap this up, Jason. Thank you so much for coming on. Appreciate it. It's been a fun discussion. Thanks for taking all the question head on. And
I can't believe we went 2.5 hours.
I told you it's going to go faster than you think. It's going to be fun.
Have people accumulate over the next 5 or 6 months a group of questions, and I'd love to do a follow up with you, and we'll after the national and stuff, and do a round 2 if you'll have me.
Oh yeah, no, you're a great guest. We even got a comment here. Where did it go? We had a comment. Oh, right here from Baseball Card Curmudgeon. Good show. Thank you, gents. Regardless of all of our views, similar or indifferent. And I think that's a great comment. I think it says it all. So thank you for that. Baz and Bobby Burrell says this show is great, good or bad. A well-informed collector keeps the hobby healthy. Kudos. Very nice. Thank you very much, Bobby. Appreciate that so much. Mookie Chilson says, Jeremy firing up the Zamboni. Great conversation. Love it, Mookie. Thank you. Jeremy, also Foul Fireball, says tag takes stereo photo of the card, enhances any imperfections. Yes, we do. Okay. Jason, again, thank you so much for coming on. Appreciate your openness and willingness to come in and again, have this nothing's off limits sort of theme to the show tonight. I thought that was great. Peter Collect, good to see you. Glad I caught this live. Sports Card Stallion, great show. Content was engaging the entire ride. All right, I'm glad you liked that. Thank you so much. All right, that's it, Jason.
I'm glad we kept people entertained for 2.5 hours. That's crazy. Follow me at OTIA Sports on Instagram. Has it been going by or no?
I've been not mining the ticker, but there you go. Jason at OTIA Sports. It'll come across the screen in just a moment. Check that out. Please follow him if you are not yet. You can follow me at jlee_sports cards live. So hit the thumbs up, as YouTubers say. Subscribe to the channel, notifications, comments, all that stuff.
And if anybody thinks of something later on, please, I get a lot of messages, but I'll try to respond to everybody. So if you have another question, I would be happy to answer. So please feel free to DM me on Instagram.
And with that, everybody, thank you for joining and being here. This episode is now over.